Naruto, the Fuinjutsu professor of the Ninja Academy. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1 Xia Yan. September 1st, the 42nd year of Konoha. It has been raining since early morning. In the misty rain, the Xia Yan on the rock wall in the distance seemed to be covered with a veil, appearing hazy and looming. There were not many pedestrians on the street, but their faces were full of hope and vitality. It has been 2 years since the end of the Second Ninja World War. People have gradually hidden the pain brought by the war in their hearts and prepared themselves to welcome the arrival of a new life. I haven't been back for a few years. It seems that the village has recovered well. A boy in a black ninja suit strolled leisurely on the street, holding a string of 3-color meatballs in his hand and eating them while walking. He looked only 15 or 16 years old, with messy silver curly hair, delicate features but a hint of laziness, and a forehead protector on his forehead that symbolized the identity of a Konoha ninja. Although he didn't hold an umbrella, there was no sign of being wet by the rain, which added a touch of mystery to him. The boy's name is Xia Yan. He was recently promoted to a special genin. Because of the mission, he needs to stay away for a long time and has not returned to Konoha for a long time. He returned to Konoha this time, actually shouldering an important mission. That is to serve as the SEAL teacher of the new semester of the ninja school. I didn't expect it to be so smooth. Not long after I submitted the application, the transfer documents came, and I didn't even need an interview. Xia Yan was in a good mood, humming a song, and his steps seemed particularly brisk. In fact, he had applied for this position several times before, but unfortunately the school always rejected him on the grounds that he was too young. Xia Yan was not happy about this. Children of 5 or 6 years old couldn't go to the battlefield, so what's wrong with being a teacher at the age of 16? You know, he can become a special genin because of his attainments in the SEAL. But this time he finally succeeded. It seems that the village has finally recognized his strength. Thinking of this, Xia Yan couldn't help but laugh at himself. Perhaps in the eyes of many people, he who became a special genin at the age of 16 is the rising star of Konoha. But Xia Yan himself knows. Compared to those 3-year-old genin, 5-year-old genin, and those who achieved the 6 paths at the age of 10 and gave Kage maternity leave, his achievements seem insignificant. Even the protagonist of the original work, Uzumaki Naruto, was only 16 years old when he became a 6-path level strongman. Sure enough, people can't be generalized. Alas. Who made him a low-profile time traveler with no plugins, no special bloodliner, and mediocre talent? To be honest, Xia Yan's ability to become a special genin now is already an extraordinary performance. You know, when he was in the ninja school, he even considered whether to give up ninja and become a chef, drop out of school to become a Roman apprentice, so that at least he could survive until the end. He can have the strength he has now, thanks to his good luck. He was assigned to the sealing class after graduation. Because there, Xia Yan got the precious opportunity to learn the sealing technique. The so-called sealing technique is a special ninjutsu that uses rune techniques to limit the opponent's chakra, block the opponent's actions, and even reduce the dimension of things. Although the sealing technique is not as cool as ordinary ninjutsu and illusion in the original work, it plays an important role every time it appears. From the curse seal on Sasuke to the evil seal performed by Kakashi, from Orochimaru's 5-element seal to Jiraiya's 5-element seal. There is also Tsumatsian seal, various seals at Jinchuriki, and even the seal of Kage Otsutsu'd by the 6-path sage brothers, all of which involve the use of sealing techniques. Xia Yan's journey of learning sealing techniques began with a book called Introduction to Sealing Techniques. This book was a textbook written by the master of sealing techniques Mito Uzumaki when the ninja school was just established. There are detailed annotations on the various basic runes used in sealing techniques, which are very suitable for beginners. From the 2 most basic runes, yin and yang. Then to the 5 elements corresponding to the basic chakra attributes: fire, wind, water, earth, and thunder. Then there are various functional runes: open, close, branch, loop, jump, select, add, subtract, multiply, divide, input, output, up, down, left, right, east, south, west, north, center, hair, white. Each rune has different writing methods for different schools, and various deformations are required according to specific uses. And this is the simplified version organized by Mito-sama. It is not difficult to see that the sealing technique is similar to mathematics. Even if you are forced to do it, you still can't do it. However, Xia Yan felt like a fish in water when learning the sealing technique. He was a programmer in his previous life, and soon found that these rooms were very similar to something he was familiar with. That is, computer programming language. And it is a high-level language with a standard library. In order to verify his idea, Xia Yan tinkered with a small invention after learning the basic runes. A rune scroll made according to programming ideas. Its function is very simple. When Xia Yan inputs chakra, a line of text will appear in the blank box in the center of the scroll. Hello world, it was as if greeting the new world that was about to come. Xia Yan's idea was correct. These runes were not just tools for performing sealing techniques, but a programming language for chakra. This reminded Xia Yan of the recorded introduction to sealing techniques about the inheritance of sealing techniques from the six-path sage, and combined with the original plot he had read in his previous life, he suddenly felt like touching an electric switch, and a flash of lightning flashed through his mind. Xia Yan had never understood before. Chakra was brought to the ninja world by Xia, and hand seals were invented by Indra. So what did the legendary six-path sage teach everyone when he explained the truth of chakra? Now he understood. It was the seal technique rune. Perhaps when the six-path sage explained the truth of chakra to the world, he was actually teaching everyone how to program chakra through runes. Perhaps the so-called ninja sect was actually a programming training institution. Then the six-path sage once wanted to connect everyone through chakra. Perhaps he was building the internet. So, the six-path sage was actually his colleague. Xia Yan felt that his fixed mindset about the sealing technique was suddenly broken, and countless sparks of inspiration burst out in his mind. With his mind open, he soon came up with a bold idea. Perhaps he could use this set of chakra programming language to build a system of his own. No system plugged in. Then he would knock one for himself. For a moment, Xia Yan was full of ambition and felt that life was full of hope again. Unfortunately, ideals are full, but reality is very skinny. Building a system based on chakra is 10 times more difficult than Xia Yan imagined. Although the rune language based on chakra and the computer language based on electronic components are similar, there are many differences in details and they cannot be copied mechanically. Moreover, the rune language has been passed down from the six-path sage era to the present day. After thousands of years, there are many missing and flawed places. Xia Yan is like holding an incomplete C language textbook with many errors and omissions to self-study. Many places have to be explored slowly by himself. In the days that followed, he either performed various tasks or collected information on sealing techniques in various parts of the Land of Fire, or studied at home, integrating the knowledge he had learned in 2 lifetimes. Now 6 years have passed. After several iterations, Xia Yan used the chakra conduction metal that he had bought with his savings to finally reduce the original mountain-like prototype to a fist-sized chakra metal ball. He used this as a carrier and barely built a simple system. The biggest feature of this chakra-based system is that it can directly interact with humans and machines through chakra, skipping the keyboard and mouse. It is similar to the intelligent brain or human brain chip that appears in science fiction movies. However, Xia Yan did not dare to put the fist-sized metal ball into his brain, but sealed it in his stomach. Theoretically, he is still a computer jinchkraki. Xia Yan completed the chakra intelligent brain not long ago, and there are only a few programs in it, which is still a long way from what he imagined. But at this time, he felt that he had reached a bottleneck. If he wants to continue to upgrade the system, he needs to master more sealing rooms and earn money to buy rare materials. This time, returning to Konoha to be a teacher of sealing techniques was Xia Yan's first step to solve these problems. Yes, Xia Yan wanted to become a teacher not for teaching, but for the books in the school library. When the ninja school was established, the major ninja clans donated a lot of books at the call of the first generation of Okage, and they're still in the school library. Although there is basically nothing good, most of them are obscure ninjutsu scrolls that are outdated and difficult to understand, or some miscellaneous notes and travel notes written by predecessors. For most people, it may be just a tasteless thing, but for Xia Yan, it is an undeveloped treasure mountain. Because runes and ancient characters in the ninja world have many similarities, it is possible that a book can inspire Xia Yan to restore the lost runes. Not to mention that the library also hides the ancient books on sealing techniques donated by Mito-sama on behalf of the Uzumaki clan, which are treasures that only a few teachers can read. Therefore, even though Xia Yan knew that teacher was a high-risk profession in this world, he still decided to become a glorious teacher. I hope the books in the library won't disappoint me. Xia Yan murmured, throwing the bamboo sticks he had finished eating into the trash can on the side of the road and walking towards the ninja school. Today was the beginning of the new semester at the ninja school. Chapter 2. I have special skills to keep out the rain. The rain began to subside, and soon only a few raindrops remained. Xia Yan walked at a leisurely pace for a long time before he arrived near the ninja school. At the school gate, there stood an uncle wearing a green ninja vest, leaning on an umbrella and looking around, as if waiting for someone. Seeing Xia Yan appear, the young uncle's eyes lit up, waving his umbrella and striding towards him, laughing and scolding loudly as he walked. Xia Yan, you kid. Haven't you changed your habit of being late after so many years? Who are you, uncle? Xia Yan complained in his heart. As the uncle approached, Xia Yan gradually recognized his identity. The greasy uncle in front of him turned out to be his former class teacher, Ikaku Imano. How could Ikaku, who was still handsome at the beginning, become like this in just a few years? Is time really a butcher's knife? Xia Yan couldn't help but sigh that the shelf life of ninjas in this world is too short. No wonder the little ninjas start looking for partners before their hair grows out. After hearing what Mr. Ikaku said, Xia Yan couldn't help but miss the days when he was in school, so he half-jokingly said the excuses he used to use when he was late in the past. Sorry, I lost my way in life. After hearing this, Ikaku Umano was also stunned. He used to be very angry about this. He looked at Xia Yan unhappily, but saw that the other person was almost as tall as him, and couldn't help but sigh. Time flies so fast, the late kid in the past has grown up now, and become the late king. Hey! Why do you still have to use the prefix late? What kind of biological evolutionary chain is this? Xia Yan couldn't help but complain. Ikaku laughed heartily. Who told you to be late like before even though you were going to be a teacher? Xia Yan rolled his eyes slightly, and said with confidence, Isn't today the opening ceremony? I came late because I calculated the time accurately, just in time to avoid the long and boring speech of the Okage. Everything was within my calculations. JPG Ikaku was very upset, and then he said faintly, Did you calculate that it rained just now, and the opening ceremony was postponed, and it just started now? Xia Yan's face froze. I was careless. It rained just before the opening ceremony. Doesn't even the sky like me? Xia Yan sighed. Maybe I came at the wrong time. No, you came at the right time. Ikaku showed a gloating smile, stretched out his hand to hook Xia Yan's shoulder, and forcibly pulled him to the school gate. If we go now, we can just catch up with the speech of the Okage. Xia Yan was frowning, and was escorted to the school gate by Ikaku as if he was going to the execution ground. Along the way, Ikaku didn't forget to nag Xia Yan. From Xia Yan's curly and long hair that looked like a bird's nest and he didn't look like a teacher, to the fact that he didn't go back to school for so many years and the teachers were so heartless. Xia Yan, who was filled with magic sound, dreamed back to the past when he forgot the time while reading in the library and was late for class and was scolded by teacher Ikaku. Soon, Ikaku found another bright spot. By the way, it was raining so hard just now and you didn't bring an umbrella. This is not okay. Don't think that you can get wet just because you are young and healthy. Wait, why are you not wet? Ikaku nagging for a long time, only to find that there was no trace of rain on Xia Yan's body, and he was a little surprised for a moment. He subconsciously looked up and saw that when the scattered raindrops fell on Xia Yan's head, they would change direction and slide to the side, and could not drip on Xia Yan at all. According to the trajectory of the raindrops sliding down, he vaguely noticed that there was a semicircular transparent barrier floating above Xia Yan's head. Is this a barrier technique? Ikaku hesitated. It's no wonder that he was a little uncertain. After all, in Ikaku's impression, the barrier technique was a very high-end ninjutsu, and it shouldn't be used for such a trivial matter as keeping out the rain. However, Xia Yan's answer ruthlessly shattered his good impression of the barrier technique. It's just a small application of the barrier technique. The so-called barrier technique is actually a special ninjutsu that can create a space that cannot be entered or exited at all by creating a barrier. Because it is very difficult to use, it usually requires the cooperation of multiple people to perform it, and the caster cannot move freely during the maintenance of the barrier. Like the sealing technique, the barrier technique is also a very difficult and high-end ninjutsu type. Unlike the ordinary 5-element escape techniques that can be used by anyone, the sealing technique and barrier technique can be said to be the high-end flowers in the ninjutsu world, which can be admired from a distance but not played with. Until they met Xia Yan. Xia Yan, who has a chakra intelligent brain, is best at tearing off the mysterious veil of these high-end flowers and turning them into his own shape. He relies on the casting auxiliary program he wrote himself. This program refers to the principles of spell slots and spell models in Western fantasy. Xia Yan can use the chakra brain to convert various ninjutsu analyses into rune spells and record them in the chakra brain. After that, Xia Yan only needs to inject chakra, and the recorded ninjutsu will be activated automatically, without having to spend time on the construction and maintenance of ninjutsu. This part of the work is all left to the chakra brain. And this is why Xia Yan has been maintaining this barrier technique and can move freely. Of course, with Xia Yan's current rune knowledge reserves and chakra volume, there are still many ninjutsu that cannot be completely converted into rune spells, so only some simple ninjutsu can be used. For example, the umbrella technique he is using now is actually just a good-looking but useless product. It is the ultimate castrated version created by Xia Yan by further deleting and simplifying the most basic barrier technique. To be honest, Xia Yan is worried that this barrier will be penetrated if it rains a little harder. Xia Yan went out in the rain today, actually for the purpose of stress resistance test. It is definitely not for the superficial reason of wanting to show off. But Ikaku was still stunned. You actually used the barrier technique as an umbrella. Ikaku's mouth twitched, and he looked at Xia Yan with a strange look. He looked like he didn't understand, but was shocked. Xia Yan shrugged, obviously used to everyone's fuss about his rune ninjutsu. Ikaku teacher, your thinking is too backward. Ninjutsu is not only used for fighting and killing, but also has many wonderful uses in life. For example, use it to keep out the rain. Ikaku was speechless. For example, use it to keep out the rain. Xia Yan nodded. Ikaku rubbed his temple, which was aching a little, and then looked at Xia Yan again. Although he was a little speechless about using the barrier technique as an umbrella, the fact that he could use this technique so unpretentious was enough to prove Xia Yan's strength. In fact, Ikaku had also heard a lot of rumors about Xia Yan's active activities in various places in the Land of Fire recently. But he always felt that it was difficult to equate the ninja who could perform all kinds of wonderful ninjutsu with the little devil in his mind. It was more like two characters with the same name. It was not until now that Ikaku really realized that Xia Yan in front of him was no longer the late ninja school student, but a Konoha ninja who could stand on his own. For a moment, he was filled with mixed feelings. I have to admit my age. Soon, all of Ikaku's emotions finally turned into relief. As a result, I heard Xia Yan say, "Teacher, wasn't your son born last year? Obviously, you are still sharp." Am I talking about admitting your age? Ikaku glared at Xia Yan, and then he was a little surprised. You even know about the birth of my Aruka? Of course, information is the life of a ninja. Xia Yan responded seriously. As the two talked, they soon came to the playground where the opening ceremony was being held. Chapter 3 Opening Ceremony. The academic year of the ninja school is divided into 2 semesters, separated by winter and summer vacations. Because it is the second semester now, the opening ceremony is not very grand. In the middle of the wet playground, a small platform was temporarily built. The third generation Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen was standing on it and giving a passionate speech, completely unaffected by the weather. Where the leaves are flying, there will be fire burning, the flames will illuminate the village, and then new leaves will sprout again. Konoha's secret ultimate illusion, the Wall of Fire, is activated. Xia Yan can even see the prompt Wall of Fire +1 constantly appearing above the heads of the students on the playground. He doesn't have any objections to the Wall of Fire. In the original work, the third generation old man sacrificed himself and practiced the Wall of Fire, which also moved him. But after coming to the ninja world for so many years and seeing the dark side of the ninja world, Xia Yan's feelings have long been worn out. The Wall of Fire talks about the dedication to caring for companions, sacrificing oneself, and illuminating others. These are all very correct ideas. Unfortunately, no matter how loud the slogans are, they cannot hide the fact that ninjas are mercenaries who are paid to do things. Even in Article 25 of the Ninja Code, it is clearly written that the mission must be the priority at all times. This means that companions and the like can be abandoned when necessary. Obviously, this is in fundamental conflict with the idea that the Wall of Fire wants to convey, and no one dares to raise any objections. Some time ago, Konoha Whitefang gave up the mission to save his companions, but was eventually forced to commit suicide by public opinion, which is the biggest irony of the current Wall of Fire. When the first generation of Hokage established the village just to prevent children from going to the battlefield, few people know about it. On the contrary, the age and requirements for graduating from the ninja school are being reduced year by year. In the final analysis, the Wall of Fire is a girl who can be dressed up by anyone, and the final right of interpretation is in the hands of the Okage. Now the third generation Okage is repeating those clashes on the stage tirelessly, which is the best proof that he himself is not confident in this theory. Xia Yan sighed softly and did not think about it any further. Anyway, he did not plan to be a Okage, so the matter of reforming Konoha should be left to the fourth generation Okage in the future. Xia Yan followed Kaku and was walking towards the teacher team next to the platform. Along the way, he took the time to look at the students on the playground, trying to find familiar faces. As a result, he found quite a few. In the third-year team, Ebisu, one of the 8 colors of Konoha, was secretly reading a small book without a cover, and he showed a lewd smile from time to time. Sharui Genma, who was often asked by the time travelers if he had a sister, was dozing off while standing, making people worry that he would swallow that 1,000 books in his mouth in his sleep. In the second-year team, Ashuma, the money unit, was chatting with the idol master Yukiorane with a smug face, not giving any face to his father who was giving a speech on the stage. In the first-year team, Konoha's Blue Beast Mike guy was listening to the third generation's speech seriously, but he was doing squats with his blood boiling while listening, which made the students around him frown. Hatake Kakashi, the chakra unit, had a gloomy face and empty eyes at this time. Obviously, he has not come out of the haze of White Fang's suicide. I'm afraid you will graduate from school soon. As for Uchiha Obito, who respects the elderly and loves the young, Xia Yan did not see him. He was probably tempted by some old lady and was late for school as soon as the school started. Not long after, Xia Yan followed Kaku to the teacher's team. Standing at the front of the team was a middle-aged woman with a serious expression. She was looking up, watching the third Okage's speech on the stage with a focused face. Hearing the footsteps approaching, she turned her eyes, frowned slightly, and looked at Xia Yan with emphasis. There were 3 parts of welcome, 3 parts of inquiry, and 4 parts of regret in her eyes. It seemed to say, "You are late again, kid." Xia Yan touched the back of his head and laughed a few times. Seeing that the other party was still stern, Xia Yan quickly restrained his smile, lowered his eyebrows and quickly found a place to stand. This lady cannot be offended. After all, she is the wife of the third Okage who is giving a speech on the stage, and is also the vice president of the ninja school Sarutobi by Waco. Although the third Okage Sarutobi Hiruzen is the nominal principal, he has no time to manage the trivialities of the school, so the actual person in charge of the ninja school is actually Sarutobi by Waco. As the saying goes, the county magistrate is not as good as the current manager, so it is better not to be remembered by her. Xia Yan decided to reduce his presence as much as possible. Unfortunately, a man as cool as him is bound to attract the attention of people around him. His lazy eyes, naturally curly silver hair and handsome face soon attracted the attention of the students below the stage, and many students began to discuss in a low voice. Is the guy standing next to Director Umano the new teacher? He looks so handsome. By the way, which teacher is he replacing? Don't you know? Mr. Makamai, who teaches the sealing arts class, had an accident while making a detonating talisman at home a few days ago and blew himself up. What? Haven't we changed the sealing arts teacher twice this year? When did the sealing arts teacher become a consumable? Is this the legendary curse of the sealing arts class? I don't know how long this teacher can last. It's so pitiful. He's still so young. How about we open a handicap to see how long this teacher can last? Obviously these students underestimated the ability of a real ninja. What they thought was a whisper was actually heard clearly by the teachers standing in front. Xia Yan naturally heard the loud conspiracies of these little brats. When he heard them start to open a handicap with his life, his expression couldn't help but become strange. The teachers around him all looked like we were professionally trained and would not laugh no matter how funny it was unless we couldn't help it. Xia Yan nudged Kaku, who was trying to hold back his laughter, with his elbow, and asked in a barely audible voice, "What the hell is the curse of the sealing arts class? How come I don't know about it? Are you sure you didn't get the wrong script? I'm not teaching the defense against the dark arts class." Kaku raised his eyebrows. "You dare to be a sealing arts teacher when you don't know anything? Who just said that information is the life of a ninja? Is this position really cursed?" Xia Yan asked in surprise. "That's not the case." Kaku shook his head and sighed. "It's just that the sealing arts teachers have changed more frequently recently, and there are strange rumors among the students. So the previous sealing arts teacher is actually fine? That can't be said to be fine. Kaku touched his chin and recalled. The previous teacher, Makamai, made a detonating talisman to blow himself up a few days ago. You just heard it. Xia Yan nodded. The previous teacher, Hatano, I remember that he made a mistake when making a sealing scroll a few months ago and sealed his head in the scroll. Black lines began to appear on Xia Yan's forehead. Before that, it was Mr. Yoshizawa who has been in charge since the sealing arts class was reopened. He is old after all. During the new year, he was eating rice cakes at home alone and choked. Xia Yan's face became darker and darker, and he finally couldn't help complaining. Is this nothing? Isn't it a complete defeat? Only then did he understand why the appointment letter came down immediately after he submitted his application. It turns out that this is a big pit. Is it too late to resign now? Don't worry too much. The security department has investigated carefully and confirmed that it was all accidents. It just happened to the sealing arts teacher. Kaku comforted him, and couldn't help but reminding Xia Yan, after all, those of you who study sealing arts are prone to various accidents, so you should be careful too. Xia Yan couldn't refute, so he had to nod slowly. The risk of studying sealing arts is indeed much higher than other ninjutsu systems. Kaku suddenly thought of something and slapped his forehead. I thought you applied only after knowing all this. I even praised you in front of other teachers for taking on the task and helping your alma mater. Okay, we'll follow this script from now on. Xia Yan said without hesitation. Kaku was speechless. This shameless character is exactly the same as before. The two wanted to say something, but they saw from the corner of their eyes that Vice Principal Saratobi Baiwaka was giving them a death stare, so they had to shut their mouths and pretend to listen to the teachings of the third Hokage. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 4 Sealing Technique Teacher's Office. The opening ceremony was still going on. Xia Yan was still thinking about the tragic experiences of his former teachers. Was it really just a coincidence? Although what Kaku said made sense, the seal technique itself was such a dangerous thing. Especially for those who were born as civilians like them, they only learned the minimum knowledge of the seal technique in the seal class, and it was difficult for them to access those precious classics. It is conceivable that after they become SEAL teachers and can read the books on the SEAL technique in the library, they will be eager to try various things. But in the absence of reference and guidance, such attempts often led to various accidents. Xia Yan had witnessed several similar accidents in the SEAL class before. It was reasonable, but Xia Yan always felt a little uncomfortable. Forget it. It's not a good idea to think about it here now. Let's collect more information before making a conclusion. After Xia Yan made up his mind moved, and an interface that only he could see appeared in front of him. This is also one of the results of Xia Yan's creation of the system, which he jokingly called the display technique. This technique refers to the principle of illusion that disrupts shaker to allow the opponent to see a specific scene, but the target of this technique is Xia Yan himself. Xia Yan can use the technique auxiliary program to perform this technique on himself. In this way, his vision and chakra intelligence brain are connected, and a visual operation interface is generated in the field of vision. The UI of this interface imitates the classic XP system, and even the landscape picture in the background of the interface seems familiar. Under the blue sky and white clouds, the green grass arches up a perfect small hill. In the upper left corner of the interface, there are several icons, representing the small programs that Xia Yan now has. Xia Yan clicked on the memo program and wrote a line of text on it. Investigate the truth of the curse of the sealing technique class, unfinished. Then he closed the memo and glanced at the third generation who was still giving a passionate speech on the stage, knowing that the opening ceremony would not end for a while. So Xia Yan opened the Minesweeper program he had recently written and played. No, it was tested. 3 hours later, Xia Yan played dozens of Minesweeper games, read 2 books with the reader program, and finally got bored and started counting the number of students on the playground, and the opening ceremony was over. I didn't expect that the third generation old man's speech skills could go a step further. The puddles on the playground were dried up by the sun, but his mouth was still not dry. Xia Yan gave a thumbs up to Saratobi Hiruzen in his heart. After the opening ceremony, the teachers and students went straight to the cafeteria. Because it was noon. In the small cafeteria reserved for teachers, Kaku led Xia Yan to greet other teachers. Xia Yan met several teachers who had taught him before, and they caught him inside about the past. They all said that they were very optimistic about Xia Yan in the past, and now, as they expected, Xia Yan has become an excellent ninja. Xia Yan thanked them for their cultivation, but secretly racked his brains and couldn't remember that they were optimistic about his performance. It seems that these teachers had hidden their expectations of him deep in their hearts, and instead used punishments such as standing, running laps, and detention to whip him to grow. There were also several younger new teachers, all of whom were passers-by who had no chance to appear in the original work. Xia Yan had a friendly exchange with them, and also opened the marking program to mark each person's name above their head so as not to forget their names. Xia Yan used to rely on this skill of remembering the name of the other person after meeting him once, which won the favor of many people. The third generation Okage Saratobi Hiruzen also smiled and chatted with Xia Yan for a few words, patting Xia Yan on the shoulder and saying that he was looking forward to his performance in the sealing technique class. "I don't believe you, you old man is very bad. You arranged me without reminding me that this sealing technique teacher is a pit." Xia Yan complained in his heart, but on the surface he smiled and agreed with the other party. Not long after, lunchtime was over. After Xia Yan had eaten and drunk enough, he followed Kaku into the teaching building and came to the sealing technique teacher's office in the corner of the first floor. Along the way, Xia Yan heard from Kaku that in addition to teaching tasks, the teacher of sealing arts also undertakes the daily maintenance of the school's barrier. That's why the teacher's office is arranged here, because next door is the school's barrier center room. The teacher of sealing arts needs to come here every once in a while to maintain the school's barrier. After Xia Yan walked into the office, his first impression was that the space here was not small. In addition to the basic tables, chairs and cabinets, there are several bookshelves in the corner, which are filled with various books and scrolls. From the furnishings placed in the office, it seems that the previous teacher still maintains the layout. Thinking of the experiences of the previous teachers, Xia Yan couldn't help but feel that this office has a feeling of a murder scene, with gusts of cold wind. "Xia Yan, you don't have class until tomorrow, so prepare for class today," Kaku said, and patted the pile of books on the desk with his hand. "I put the textbooks and reference books you need here." Xia Yan was a little flattered, and his heart was slightly warmed, and he felt that this office was not so gloomy. "I didn't expect that Kaku teacher was so well prepared." He thanked him. "Teacher, you are so well prepared. I'm really sorry to bother you." "Not at all," Kaku Umano said solemnly. "After all, these are already made, and they are the relics of the previous teachers." Xia Yan's mouth twitched, and he finally squeezed out a sentence. "That's indeed not a problem." After giving Xia Yan a few more instructions, Kaku Umano left in a hurry. School just started today, and he was actually quite busy as the dean of teaching. After Kaku Umano left, Xia Yan decided to start working. The first step was to check this room to see if there were any sealing magic arrays left by the previous teachers. As the saying goes, when you have a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail. According to Xia Yan's understanding of his colleagues, he knew that many people had persecution delusions, and their favorite thing was to set up various sealing magic arrays as traps. Sure enough, it was just as he expected. Xia Yan walked around the room for a few times and found several hidden rooms in the corners of the office, as well as several wood carvings disguised as decorations, which were actually engraved with rune spells. Basically, they were props used to set up a perception barrier, and the function was to remind the caster when someone entered the office. It seems that the previous seal teachers were not seriously persecuted. They only set up a perception array. Xia Yan cracked the restrictions on these props in a few seconds, and studied the spells a little bit, but didn't find anything worth learning from. It was very consistent with the level of an ordinary seal teacher. Then he carefully searched the room again, and after making sure that there was nothing missing, he started the second step. Set up the seal array in the room. Yes, Xia Yan also has a bit of persecution delusion. You know, since Xia Yan graduated and joined the SEAL class, he has been running around in the Fire Country, dealing with various monsters that were mentioned in the original work but didn't appear much because of the wrong style. Although these unknown creatures are not strong, they have many strange characteristics and are difficult to kill, so the sealing technique is the best weapon to deal with them. After spending more time with these monsters, Xia Yan is naturally a little suspicious. He can't sleep well without a few formations around him. Not to mention the curse of the sealing technique class. Although Xia Yan also agrees with Kaku's statement and thinks that it is probably just a coincidence, it is better to be prepared. It takes a lot of time to set up a complete fixed barrier, so Xia Yan decided to make a simple version today. He took out a pen and a carving knife, and first made some modifications to the talismans and wood carvings he had just found, changing the reminder object of the perception A to himself. Then he saw that there were still a lot of blanks on the wood carving, so he decided to add a shielding array and a binding array. One is used to isolate the prying of perception ninjutsu, and the other is used to attack people who enter the room without permission. Xia Yan fixed the wood carving on the table with his left hand, picked up the carving knife with his right hand and turned into an afterimage, and quickly drew rune spells on the wood carving. If someone who knows the seal technique sees the speed at which Xia Yan draws runes, they will be surprised. You should know that drawing runes is not just about drawing the runes, but injecting chakra of specific properties into the runes in every stroke. Only in this way can the runes drawn work. This is just like the ninja's seal is not just about making various gestures, but also about mobilizing the body's chakra to flow in the meridians at the same time. Otherwise, with the ninja's physical fitness, it is not difficult to make 5 seals in 1 second. In short, the control of chakra will affect the speed of seal making and rune drawing. Xia Yan's drawing speed at this time is obviously beyond the normal level, which is something that even senior seal masters cannot do. He can do this by relying on the printer program in the chakra brain. The principle of this program is very similar to that of the spell aiding program. Both use the chakra brain to automatically control the chakra, thereby making up for Xia Yan's lack of chakra control. When Xia Yan draws runes, he only needs to focus on drawing the shape of the rune, and the work of injecting chakra is completely left to the chakra brain. That's why Xia Yan was able to draw runes at such an amazing speed. Soon, Xia Yan almost finished the drawing work. You can see that the wood carving is covered with densely packed runes. A dozen runes make up a rune formula, and a dozen rune formulas finally make up a completed magic circle. As the last rune was drawn, the rune formulas on the wood carving emerged with faint light one by one, forming a whole, announcing the formation of the magic circle. Xia Yan followed suit and did the same with the other wood carvings. Finally, these runes and wood carvings were arranged in various places in the room. After everything was done, Xia Yan wiped his sweat and looked around. The office seemed to be no different from before, but Xia Yan felt much more comfortable, as if he was back home. Chapter 5 Lesson Preparation. After a short break, Xia Yan started the most important task of the day. That was to prepare for the first class tomorrow. Xia Yan sat at his desk and picked up a textbook on the table and flipped through it. When he was in school, the Second Ninja World War was approaching, and the ninja school activated the wartime mechanism. Many courses were cancelled, including the sealing technique class. Xia Yan's sealing technique was not learned until he was assigned to the sealing technique class. So he really had never taken a sealing technique class seriously, and he was not very clear about the course content of the sealing technique class in the ninja school. The current sealing technique class seemed to have been re-established 2 years ago. Xia Yan flipped through these textbooks and found that they were simpler than he had imagined. Moreover, several of these books were repeated. In fact, there was only 1 textbook and 2 reference books, plus 3 previous teachers' teaching notes. The entire sealing technique course actually only requires students to understand a textbook that is not too thick. This textbook is essentially based on the Introduction to Sealing Technique written by Mito-sama, but a lot of advanced knowledge has been deleted. The goal of the whole book is to enable students to draw a series of basic sealing techniques such as a lamp array after learning it, and to detect and crack basic sealing traps. Xia Yan was able to do this after studying in a sealing class for half a year. But it is true. After all, this course is just an elective course, with only 3 classes a week. In addition, students have other learning tasks, so it is already good to be able to learn a series of lamp arrays in the end. In the final analysis, this course only plays a screening role. The purpose is to find children who are really talented in sealing. After graduation, these children will be assigned to the sealing class and start to learn the real sealing technique. It can also be seen from the teaching diary that the previous teachers obviously understood this and adopted the cramming teaching method. Only let the students memorize and force the sealing rooms to be memorized without explaining the function of each room in detail. Only know the result, but not the reason. When Xia Yan first looked at the notes, he was a little disdainful of their approach. But after considering the length of class time and the teaching tasks to be completed each semester, he actually found that following the rules and continuing to let students memorize by rote was the most cost-effective way. However, Xia Yan quickly rejected this path. It was too unchallenging. Moreover, when he came back to be a teacher of sealing techniques this time, in addition to envying the library's collection of books, he also had the task of training some assistants to share his research topics. After all, a person's energy is limited. Even Orochimura has Kabata Yakushi as an assistant. And letting students memorize by rote will not be able to discover the talents he needs. After all, instilling a lot of superficial knowledge into people and reciting a lot of textbooks without error is absolutely impossible to improve people's intelligence level. The conditions that can really help students succeed are judgment, experience, pioneering spirit and personality. Another reason is that Xia Yan didn't know when the Third Ninja War would break out, and he was worried that the sealing technique course would be cancelled like before. So he had already decided to be innovative and make achievements, with the goal of surviving in the future elective course Battle Royale. If we don't want students to memorize by rote, we have to explain the basic runes one by one. Xia Yan wanted to use the memo program to record his thoughts, but after thinking about it, he took out a new notebook and wrote on it with a pen. Considering that we need to mobilize the enthusiasm of students, we have to add some interesting practical links. Should we let them write diaries with runes? No, maybe we can focus on a simple technique and let everyone master this technique after learning the required runes. At least there is some hope. Xia Yan murmured. The most basic series of lamp arrays are still a bit complicated for students. It is not something that can be learned in a short time. Perhaps we should not limit it to the sealing technique. Also, if we add this part of the learning content, the class time may not be enough. Some learning tasks will have to be left for students to complete after class, which will increase everyone's burden. Other teachers may also have opinions. Xia Yan scratched his head and crossed out several ideas he had written down. The key is which technique to focus on, so that it does not add too much burden to everyone, is practical, and includes most of the basic runes. Xia Yan opened the system interface and began to look through the various techniques recorded in the Technique Assistance program. Display technique. Protective umbrella technique. BGM technique. Camera technique. Flashlight technique. If you want to not add too much burden to everyone, you should not be too fancy. You have to start with the 3 body techniques that must be learned in school. In the end, Xia Yan's eyes stayed on a technique at the bottom of the list. Projection technique, also jokingly called projector technique by Xia Yan. This technique actually combines the principles of clone technique and transformation technique. Its function is to transform your clone into the appearance of other things and project it near you. The effect is similar to Xia Yan's holographic projection in his previous life. This technique was created by Xia Yan after he began to study the culture of ninjutsu runes, through the analysis and research of the 3 body techniques. From here, we can see a little bit of the terrifying nature of chakra. In the previous life, holographic projection, which had been studied for decades but still not popularized, was developed by Xia Yan, a trainee who had practiced sealing techniques for a year and a half, in this world. Don't think that this technique doesn't seem to have any lethality. In fact, for a long time in Xia Yan's career as a ninja in the sealing class, this technique was his trump card, with countless wonderful uses. And because the difficulty of this technique is not too high, in addition to using the rune formula version, Xia Yan even reversed it and developed a seal version. And if he uses the auxiliary program for casting, he can even create a very complex large-scale illusion. The more Xia Yan looked at this technique, the more suitable it seemed to him. When students practiced constructing the rune formula of this technique, they would also have a deep understanding of that transformation technique and the clone technique, which would help them master these techniques. Look at me, it's not easy to be a sealing technique teacher. I have done the work of a ninjutsu teacher. Xia Yan chuckled. Although it was painful for Xia Yan to teach this technique to students, he finally gritted his teeth and made up his mind. After all, the Third Ninja World War will break out in a few years, and perhaps learning more of this technique can help more students survive. After making up his mind to make projection technique the core of teaching, Xia Yan suddenly had a lot of inspiration. Many ideas that could not be realized because of running around seemed to have a place to use again. The pen in Xia Yan's hand danced rapidly, recording one incredible idea after another in his notebook. It was not until the sun set and the light in the office was so dim that he could not see anything that Xia Yan woke up. Looking at the dense text and stick drawings on the notebook, he couldn't help but smile. Although there are still many things to be discussed, it is enough to deal with tomorrow's class. Xia Yan closed the notebook and prepared to leave, and suddenly an idea popped up in his mind. Maybe in a few months, there will be a new sealing technique teacher coming to this office. After seeing this notebook, he may sigh that his previous teacher had a wonderful idea, but it was a pity that he died too early. After shaking his head to get rid of this picture from his mind, Xia Yan felt that this dim office seemed a bit gloomy and scary. It's getting late, so I'd better slip away. Xia Yan cleaned up the desk quickly and left the office. Walking to the school gate, Xia Yan met Umino Waikaku, who had just finished work. As a result, he was forcibly dragged to his house for dinner. At Umino Waikaku's house, Xia Yan met his teacher's wife Umino Umi and their newborn child Iruka. It can be seen that the child has a talent for water escape. As soon as he saw Xia Yan, he tried to use water escape and water gum to sneak attack him, a 16-year-old man. However, Xia Yan still dodged it easily, but Umino Waikaku behind him suffered. After eating at Umino's house and chatting with the Umino couple for a long time about his experiences over the years, Xia Yan finally got rid of the enthusiastic two people and returned to his own home. Xia Yan, who was a little tired, went straight to bed after washing up, to recharge his energy for the teacher life that would officially begin tomorrow. Chapter 6 First Class, Part 1. The next morning, in the sealing technique classroom. Xia Yan walked into the classroom at the sound of the bell and saw more than 30 students sitting inside. Although it seemed that there were many people, in fact, this was the total number of students from all grades combined. Because the sealing technique class was reopened 2 years ago, and the previous teachers had problems, the teaching progress was intermittent, causing many students to give up this course. In order to increase the number of students, this course, which was originally for students in the 3rd grade and above, began to recruit students in the 1st and 2nd grades for the first time this year. Unfortunately, there were only 2 or 3 people in each grade taking this course, and there were not many people in total. Therefore, Saratobi Baiwako simply waved his hand and merged several grades into one class, and started learning together from the beginning. This was convenient for Xia Yan, as he only had to teach one class and only hit 3 classes a week. Xia Yan walked behind that podium, put the textbook on the table, and glanced at the entire classroom. Among the students sitting below, Xia Yan saw many familiar faces. Even Uchiha Obito, who he had not seen before, sat next to Nohara Lin, and turned his head slightly from time to time to look at the other's profile in ecstasy. A real dog. However, Xia Yan did not seem to see the figures of Hitaki Kakashi and Might Guy. It seems that they did not choose this course. In the last row of the classroom, the vice principal Saratobi Baiwako was sitting alone. He should be here to audit Xia Yan's first class. It can be seen that Xia Yan's youth still makes her a little worried. While Xia Yan was looking at the students were also secretly observing their new teacher. Xia Yan was seen wearing a black ninja suit inside and a white coat outside. There were no buttons. His hands were in the pockets of his coat and he smiled. He looked only 15 or 16 years old, but the whole person exuded a unique aura that made people dare not despise him. Many students whispered below, surprised at Xia Yan's youth and handsomeness. Sitting in the front row, Kuranayu Shishin next to her whispered, "My father and teacher Xia Yan have carried out missions together. He told me yesterday that teacher Xia Yan's style is different from that of ordinary ninjas. Now I finally understand what he means. Compared to a ninja, Xia Yan in front of him is more like a gentle scholar." Xia Yan clapped his hands lightly. The clapping was not loud, but strangely, it reached everyone's ears at the same volume. The students soon quieted down. "Then let's start the class." Xia Yan looked at the students below. "First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Yushin Xia Yan, a special ninja. I used to work in the sealing class and was not in Konoha for many years, so you may have rarely seen me before. Now I am your new sealing technique teacher. From now on, you can call me Teacher Xia Yan. I know that many of you have already learned some knowledge of sealing techniques, but in order to take care of the first-year students, we should start from the beginning in the first class and talk about the history of sealing techniques." When the senior students heard this, they immediately became agitated and looked disappointed. I thought that since this seal teacher was so young, he would not teach by rote like the previous teachers, and have some new tricks. I didn't expect it to be the same, and they had to start from the boring history of seal. Some students began to consider whether to give up this course. However, before they could raise any objections, Xia Yan, with a slightly raised corner of his mouth, had already raised his right hand and snapped his fingers. Almost in the blink of an eye, everything in the classroom except the chairs disappeared, and the surroundings became pure white. Before the little ninjas could be surprised, the scene in the classroom changed again. Countless black runes connected end-to-end emerged from the ground and flew into the sky like lines of ink, scaring many little ninjas to stand up and keep exclaiming. Immediately afterwards, these rune spells began to combine and connect, forming a complex spherical magic circle that wrapped the entire classroom. Then, all the rune spells gradually dissipated and merged into the void. Like coloring a blank canvas, the surrounding scene gradually changed, and finally turned into a desert with a large number of wind-eroded stone pillars. This earth-shaking change shocked the young ninjas. They looked around with their mouths wide open, unable to speak for a moment. "Please sit down, don't worry. This is just a little application of the seal rune." Xia Yan comforted everyone. "It's to let you know in advance what you'll learn in the future. Everything that happened just now is actually a large-scale illusion created by Xia Yan with the help of the power of the spell-casting auxiliary program and projection. The purpose is to stun all the students in the first class. It seems to be effective." After listening to Xia Yan's comfort, the young ninjas were not relieved, but a little confused. This is a fucking seal. Then what they learned before might not be a fake seal. And they have to learn this in the future. Did teacher Xia Yan not return to Konoha for too long and overestimate their level? No wonder other teachers always say that they are the worst class they have ever taught. Was the standard so high before? You know, now you can graduate as long as you know the three-body technique. Quick. Close the door and release Obito. Let the teacher know our true level. Sarutobi Waiko, who was sitting in the last row of the classroom, was also a little surprised. Although she was not very familiar with the seal technique, she was also sure that the scene around her was obviously beyond the scope of the seal technique. She tried to reach out and touch the stone pillar beside her, and found that her palm went straight through it. There was no entity. Waiko pondered for a moment. Although she did not feel the chakra in her body become disordered, she still secretly formed a seal to break the illusion. As a result, the surrounding scene did not change at all. "It's not an illusion." Waiko stared at Xia Yan in front of the podium and muttered to herself, "It seems that this time I found a different seal technique teacher for the school. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing." After a long time, after Xia Yan's repeated comfort, the little ninjas finally sat back in their seats. At this time, they all looked at Xia Yan with excitement. Because these students have realized that the seal technique class this semester will definitely be different from usual. Some people have already mourned for those students who had given up this course before. And the students who were about to give up this course just now are secretly rejoicing. Xia Yan coughed lightly, drew everyone's attention back to himself, and finally began to give a formal lecture. The history of the seal technique can be traced back to the legendary Six-Path Sage. According to records, it was the Six-Path Sage who created the runes used in the seal technique and used the power of the seal technique to seal a terrible monster. Although many people now disdain this statement, thinking that people who study the seal technique are flattering themselves, due to the nature of my work, I have traveled all over the Land of Fire and collected a lot of historical materials. I found that this statement may not be completely unreasonable. As Xia Yan talked about the history of the seal technique, the surrounding scene also changed. For example, at this time, the students saw two figures slowly emerging in the desert not far behind Xia Yan. Magic seal wave. A bald old man wearing a vest and shorts and sunglasses shouted. The next moment, his raised palms lit up a ball of green light, and a strange wind blew towards a green-skinned monster with tentacles on his head opposite him. Ah! The green-skinned monster lost control of his body with a scream and was caught in a vortex like airflow. His body began to twist and stretch, and finally after circling in the air for several circles, he was sealed in a rice cooker. Although they were only watching from a distance, the powerful force of the magic seal wave and the screams of the monster at the end still deeply shocked the students, and they couldn't come back to their senses for a long time. Could this be the truth of history, the process of the six immortals sealing monsters thousands of years ago? It turns out that rice cookers have such a long history. Is this really something we can see without spending money? I always feel that I accidentally saw something incredible. Sitting in the front row, Yui Kyorane raised her hand, her red agate eyes flickered. Teacher Xia Yan, did these scenes really happen? The students also pricked up their ears and looked at Xia Yan expectantly. Xia Yan smiled slightly and pointed to the place where the blackboard used to be. I saw a line of text appearing on it at some point. This scene is purely fictional, and any similarity is purely coincidental. Plop. The students were all stunned. Xia Yan spread his hands and said innocently, "How could I possibly know the truth about the Six-Path Sage sealing the monster 1,000 years ago?" Chapter 7 First Lesson, Part 2. The sealing technique class is still going on. Xia Yan paced back and forth in front of the podium, telling the history and evolution of the sealing technique. And it is worth mentioning that the Yonmyoji who used various talismans to exorcise demons and monsters in the past actually also relied on the power of sealing technique. But later, in the business competition with the ninja, the sealing technique, which had a high learning cost, lost to the simple and violent ninjutsu, and the profession of Onmyoji was gradually swept into the garbage dump of history. However, there are still many descendants of Onmyoji left in various places, responsible for guarding the forbidden areas where various monsters are sealed for generations. You may encounter them in the future, but don't become the stupid character who releases the monsters in the story. As Xia Yan introduced, various scenes continued to emerge around him. A powerful demon was sealed in a wine bottle by an Onmyoji and thrown into the sea. Whoever can rescue it will have one of his wishes fulfilled. A seriously injured witch shot a sealing arrow at the cost of her life, sealing the dog-eared monster on the sacred tree. There is also a young Onmyoji named Xia, who uses a half-red and half-white sealing ball to subdue various cute little monsters and embarks on a journey to become a master of sealing techniques. These scenes cannot be said to be different from what Xia Yan said, but they can only be said to be completely unrelated. However, everyone still watched it intently, even Sarutobi Paiwako, who was sitting in the last row. They have never even seen ordinary movies, but they suddenly appreciate the holographic movie carefully created by Xia Yan. How can they not be addicted to it? And this is exactly Xia Yan's purpose. He explained history to everyone, not to make students remember these boring histories. Instead, he took this opportunity to show his projection skills, so that everyone would be interested in this course. After all, as a person who has experienced it, Xia Yan knows that the real learning of sealing techniques is very boring. If I don't dangle a carrot in front of everyone, I'm afraid few people will be able to hold on. Then Xia Yan began to speak up. He talked about the Warring States period when monsters gradually disappeared. The sealing technique was no longer limited to dealing with monsters, but was more used to deal with enemies who were also humans. It was also during this period that the Yonmyoji system began to decline. The most important event afterwards was the marriage alliance between the Senju clan and the Uzumaki clan, who were good at sealing techniques, which led to the establishment of Konoha not long after. At this point, Xia Yan felt that the history of sealing techniques had been told. The fall of the Whirlpool country a few years ago is a bit sensitive and had not been recorded in the book, so it was better not to mention it. So he raised his right hand again and snapped his fingers lightly. Just like a colorful soap bubble being popped, the surrounding scene gradually disappeared and turned back into the classroom. The little ninjas seemed to have had a long dream. After a while, they slowly came back to their senses, and regretful sighs came one after another. Xia Yan smiled and clapped his hands to attract everyone's attention back. I have finished talking about the history of sealing techniques. I'm not going to talk about the specific content in this class, so now is the time for questions and answers. If you have any questions about sealing techniques, you can raise your hands and ask them. Swish, swish, swish. The classroom suddenly turned into a jungle of arms. Xia Yan also saw Sarutobi Paiwako in the last row subconsciously raised his hand, then quickly put it down after realizing it, and finally pretended to be nonchalant. Ignore, ignore. Xia Yan could only pretend not to see it and randomly pointed to a boy to ask a question. Teacher Xia Yan, will every class be like this in the future? The boy asked expectantly. Of course, Xia Yan smiled slightly, it's impossible. After all, this is a sealing technique class, not a film and television appreciation class. The little ninjas whined again after hearing what Xia Yan said. Teacher, can you please stop breathing heavily when you speak? But, Xia Yan said, if everyone's progress in class is fast enough and there is spare time, I don't mind showing you some stories, such as the love story of the Mako and the dog demon just now. Sure enough, I knew there was an affair when I saw their eyes just now. A girl from the Inuzuka clan said loudly. Most girls were also excited as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Most children in the ninja world mature early, especially girls who were the most vulnerable to such love stories. As for boys, it is obvious that they're late to open up. Teacher, we don't want to see any love stories. What we want to see is whether the Onmyoji named Xia can become a master of sealing techniques in the end. The boys quickly raised an objection. The classroom suddenly became noisy, and the boys and girls divided into two factions to argue about whether they wanted to see the sequel of the story. However, there was a traitor among the boys. Achia Obito. This dog licker jumped to the girls' camp without hesitation, just to make Boyo Harlin smile. No Hara beside him smiled, but it was an awkward but polite smile, and she didn't know whether to laugh or cry at Obito's behavior. Ashuma looked at Obito with envy, and wanted to imitate him to please Kurone. But he always felt that his mother Saratobi by Wako's eyes were always on him, so he didn't dare to move at all. Kurone held her chin with her right hand, her cheeks slightly bulged, and she felt a little depressed. In the current atmosphere, she was embarrassed to say that she was actually more interested in the story of Onmyoji Shiaozu. The number of people on both sides was similar, so the result was naturally a stalemate, and in the end, teacher Xia Yan had to arbitrate. Xia Yan watched them for a long time and was waiting for this. He said with a smile, "In this case, why don't we split into two groups, and whichever group has the higher average score in the future will have the final say." As soon as the voice fell, most of the students were eager to fight, determined to give the other group a taste of their own medicine, and their enthusiasm for learning was unprecedentedly high. The students with poor grades felt a chill down their spines, and stared at the smiling teacher Xia Yan in front of the podium with a dull face. They soon understood the sinisterhood of Xia Yan's plan. This means that their grades are no longer only related to themselves, but also linked to the entire group. It is conceivable that other students will persecute these poor students inhumanely in order to see the stories they want to see. Thinking of being supervised to do homework every day in the future, their expressions became gloomy. Saratobi by Wako sat in the last row and saw all the students, with a stunning light flashing in his eyes. Unexpectedly, in less than one class, Xia Yan had already played this group of devils in his hands and trained them to be obedient. It's so terrifying. Saratobi by Wako is now thinking that Xia Yan is too tricky, and she has to come over to watch to prevent Xia Yan from fooling the students. It's definitely not to do this to see the sequel to the story of the Mako and the Dog Demon. Xia Yan clapped his hands to quiet everyone down, then smiled and said, "Any other questions?" Swish. The jungle of arms was born again. This time Xia Yan asked Nohara, who was sitting next to Obito, to ask her question. "Teacher, you just said that the technique you used was also a sealing technique, but why is it completely different from what we learned before?" Rin stood up and asked curiously. Xia Yan looked at her and said, "Because what I just performed was not a sealing technique, but I just used the runes used in the sealing technique." He paused for a moment and continued, "I believe that students who have studied the sealing technique should also realize that the runes used in the sealing technique actually have a complete system for the use of chakra, and are not limited to the sealing technique. Theoretically, what can be done with hand seals, can also be done with runes." After Xia Yan finished speaking, the expected scene of the young ninjas suddenly realizing did not appear. Only a few students headed by Kurone seemed to have realized something, and the others looked confused. "It seems that I have overestimated everyone's level." Xia Yan looked helpless. "Then I will demonstrate it first." Hearing Xia Yan's words, the little ninjas cheered softly. Although they didn't quite understand what teacher Xia Yan was saying, they knew that there was something interesting to watch. Saratobi by Wako also sat up straight. She had also dabbled in sealing techniques, but was not proficient in them. Although she had heard of what Xia Yan said, she had never seriously considered it, so she was very curious. Let's take the clone technique as an example. Now I will show you 3 ways to use the clone technique. Chapter 8. First lesson, Part 2. First, let's talk about the most common and basic use of the clone technique, which is to use hand seals to guide the flow and change of chakra in the body to perform the technique. Under everyone's gaze, Xia Yan placed his hands on his chest and slowly made hand seals so that everyone could see clearly. Wei, Si, Yin. After 3 simple hand seals. With a bang, the smoke beside Xia Yan exploded, and a figure that looked exactly like him appeared. This was the clone created by the clone technique. Although it looked lifelike, it was actually a phantom without a physical body. This is the clone technique that everyone learned in school. Is there any problem? The little ninjas nodded like chickens pecking at rice. Although the clone technique is only an E-level ninjutsu, it is one of the 3 ninjutsu that must be learned in the ninja school designated by the 2nd generation Ukage Tobrama, so it naturally has its important significance. Among the 3 techniques, the clone technique represents the type of ninjutsu that releases chakra from the body. Its ninjutsu principles can be applied to most ninjutsu, so everyone should not underestimate this technique. Yes, the young ninjas agreed with a long tone. Obviously, other teachers have also told them these words and they are tired of hearing them. Seeing that everyone has no questions, Xia Yan continued to talk. When we fully master this technique, we can try various changes. For example, reduce the number of seals and try to directly control the flow and change of chakra through body instincts. If we reduce the number of seals one by one like this, the final destination is the ninjutsu without seals. Xia Yan said while spreading his hands so that everyone can see clearly that he did not make any hand seals. Without any signs, another cloud of smoke suddenly exploded beside him, and the second clone appeared. Wow! The young ninjas exclaimed in a mysterious way. Although this was just a simple clone technique, Xia Yan was able to perform it without any hand seals, which still refreshed their three views. Obito couldn't help but complain in a low voice. Why didn't other teachers tell me this? If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have to practice those troublesome hand seals. Noharin, who was sitting next to him, covered her mouth and smiled, and explained to Obito in a low voice. In fact, the teacher said it in the ninjutsu class, although it was just mentioned briefly, because this is not a ninjutsu we can learn now. What? So that's the case. Obito scratched his head with a look of regret. It seems that his plan to be Kakashi after learning the no-hand ninjutsu was aborted before it even started. Xia Yan in front of the podium continued to explain to everyone. In theory, all jutsu can be cast without hand seals by directly controlling chakra. But obviously, this is very difficult. So people in the past developed various methods to assist in casting jutsu, and hand seals are one of them. Xia Yan paused for a moment, letting everyone digest it before continuing. In addition to reducing the number of hand seals, we can also try to do the opposite, choose to increase the number of hand seals. First-class ninjas will use this method to make subtle adjustments to the jutsu according to the situation in battle, such as condensing more chakra to increase the lethality of the jutsu, or further shaping the form of the jutsu. As the number of hand seals increases, the jutsu will become more and more complex, and the quantitative change will lead to qualitative change, and eventually become a new ninjutsu. This is also the most common idea for developing ninjutsu. The ninjutsu that is still circulating in the ninja world is like this. It has been improved by generations and finally became what we use now. The little ninjas showed expressions of sudden enlightenment. I learned something new. It turns out that the ninjutsu they use is from this. But the next part is the key point. Xia Yan continued to introduce. If we go one step further and continue to increase the number of seals, and even continue to split each seal into smaller seals, until it can no longer be split, at this time, if we record the smallest units of these seals on paper or other carriers, we will find an amazing fact: they are surprisingly similar to the runes used in sealing techniques. Some students couldn't help but take a breath after hearing Xia Yan's words. The seals used in ninjutsu and the runes used in sealing techniques. They thought that these two things were not related, but they were unexpectedly connected here. Xia Yan smiled and nodded. It seems that some students already know what this means. That is to say, for the same technique, we can completely use a series of rune techniques to replace the function of seals. Xia Yan flicked his hand, and a rectangular piece of paper appeared between his index finger and middle finger, which was covered with densely drawn talismans. The talismans often used by onmyoji in the past are a good example. As soon as the voice fell, Xia Yan threw the talisman. The talisman flew forward and suddenly exploded. After the smoke dissipated, another clone of Xia Yan appeared in the same place. This is a talisman that I copied based on historical records. It has rune patterns that can be used to perform clone jutsu. As long as chakra is injected, it can achieve the same effect as ordinary clone jutsu. So I call this jutsu the rune clone jutsu. At this point, Xia Yan had a clone in front of him, on the left, and on the right. Seal clone jutsu, no seal clone jutsu, rune clone jutsu, Xia Yan said softly. These are the three ways to use the clone jutsu. Papa. The little ninjas below immediately burst into warm applause. Although most people still didn't quite understand what Xia Yan's action meant, it didn't stop them from going home to show off to their parents. Do you know the three ways to use the clone technique? After waiting for a while, Xia Yan clapped his hands to quiet everyone down, and then concluded. Through the demonstration just now, you can know that the three methods of controlling chakra through body instinct, controlling chakra through hand seals, and controlling chakra through runes are actually convertible to each other. This also means that the ninjutsu we usually use can be fully performed using runes. At this point, Xia Yan couldn't help but sigh. General ninjutsu training is to constantly practice hand seals and control chakra, so as to speed up the hand seal speed and reduce the number of hand seals. This is essentially doing subtraction, constantly approaching the one that relies solely on body instinct to control chakra. The idea of the rune system is different. It is to decompose the technique into runes, and then master them one by one. This is essentially doing addition, constantly approaching the whole that controls chakra through wisdom. There is no difference between the two paths, and they may even lead to the same destination. Because, one is all is one. As Xia Yan was talking, he realized that the little ninjas below all opened their mouths slightly, looking like they were listening to a foreign language. He knew that he had gone too deep and no one could understand him. He lacked teaching experience. With his finger gently tapping his forehead, Xia Yan organized his words and explained in a way that the little ninjas could understand. What I actually want to say is that everyone has different talents. If you find that you have mediocre talent in practicing ordinary ninjutsu, then you might as well try another path. Perhaps in the field of runes, you will find your strengths. As for those who have no talent in either path, Xia Yan said that being a Roman apprentice is actually a very promising job. The little ninjas naturally didn't know that Xia Yan had added that sentence in their minds at the end, and many students with mediocre grades became excited. That's right. It's not that they don't work hard, but that they didn't choose the right path. Maybe if they change the track, they can overtake and defeat those geniuses in the general sense. Teacher Xia Yan, so the jutsu you used before was actually a ninjutsu that used runes? At this time, no Harlin raised her hand again to ask a question. Everyone then remembered that Xia Yan used the clone technique to demonstrate it in order to explain the principle of the technique he just used. Xia Yan nodded. Yes, the projection technique I just performed is indeed a rune ninjutsu. Compared with the seal ninjutsu, the biggest feature of the rune ninjutsu is that it can construct very complex techniques. Because the seal ninjutsu needs to be sealed on the spot, it is necessary to consider the pre-swing. The time of sealing determines that the number of seals cannot be too many. For example, the famous water dragon bullet technique requires 44 seals, which actually has a kind of showmanship component, which is probably the limit of the number of seals. Many students were frightened by the 44 seals Xia Yan mentioned and retreated from their tactics. How long would it take to seal? I'm afraid they would be beaten to death before they finished the seal. Are there really fools who use such complex ninjutsu in actual combat? Everyone couldn't help but whisper. Xia Yan's mouth curled up, and it was a pity that Kakashi didn't come to this class. He coughed twice to attract everyone's attention, and then continued. As for rune ninjutsu, rune formulas are usually prepared in advance and recorded on a specific carrier. So as long as you can write it down, the chakra is sufficient, and the carrier that carries the runes can withstand it, then it's no problem to draw as many runes as you want. Just like the projection technique I just performed, although it is essentially just the simplest application of clone technique and transformation technique, with the help of runes, it can present an extremely complex scene. What? The technique just now is just the application of clone technique and transformation technique. The little ninjas listened to it, and only understood the last sentence, and couldn't help showing an incredible expression. If that is clone technique and transformation technique, then what did we learn before? The little ninjas began to doubt their lives again. Don't you understand? It's the magical runes that work. Some students began to have a strong interest in runes. Wait. The teacher seemed to have said before that this is the content of our future courses. Such shouting rang out in the classroom. When everyone heard this, they suddenly quieted down and looked at Xia Yan with expectant eyes. Xia Yan smiled and nodded. Mastering the basic runes required for this technique is indeed the content of future teaching. Whether you can learn it is another question. Great. Warm cheers broke out in the classroom. Many girls showed fascinated expressions on their faces. They were already imagining that after learning this technique, they would write their own stories. Yui Kyorei, who came from a family of illusionists, thought more deeply. What she was thinking about was the difference between this projection technique and traditional illusions, and what chemical reaction would occur if the two are superimposed. Obito's eyes lit up. If he learned this technique, he might be able to defeat Kakashi, that bastard. Haha, it's right that guy didn't choose this course. Although he hadn't thought about how to use this technique in battle. Ebisu, who was wearing sunglasses, didn't know what he was thinking. Suddenly, his nose bled and he skillfully took out a red handkerchief to wipe it. Everyone was drooling over Xia Yan's promises, and their enthusiasm for the sealing technique class was unprecedentedly high. They raised their hands and asked various questions. Xia Yan also accepted all the questions and answered them one by one. For example, someone asked if it was wrong not to teach sealing technique in the sealing technique class. Xia Yan's answer was, If you just learn ceiling technique, then with the time you allocate to ceiling technique, it will take about 2 or 3 years to successfully perform the simplest ceiling technique. If you learn projection technique, most people will be able to produce results before the end of this semester. And I personally think that letting everyone dabble in other uses of runes will help stimulate everyone's enthusiasm for this course. At the same time, the rune formulas required to learn projection technique can also be used in various ceiling techniques. When we really start to learn ceiling technique in the later stage, we will be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. This is what is called the shortest shortcut is the long way round. The little ninjas were convinced by Xia Yan's words and expressed their determination to obey teacher Xia Yan's arrangements. After that, seeing that there was still some time, Xia Yan completed the grouping as he had said before. There was an episode in which Obito, who had previously defected to the girls' camp, was now disliked by the girls because of his poor grades. Even though Harurin could only say that she could do nothing to help. The boys also expressed their refusal to accept this traitor. For a moment, Obito was in a situation where no one liked him and he could only look at Xia Yan with tears in his eyes and a look of help. Out of bad taste, Xia Yan finally assigned Obito to the girls' group. Finally, Xia Yan looked at the clock in the lower right corner of the system interface, and seeing that the time was almost up, he knocked on the podium to ask everyone to be quiet. I believe everyone has gained a lot in this class, so today's homework is to tell the history of the ceiling technique in your own words. The focus should be on analyzing why the Onmyoji's talisman system has declined, and whether there are any areas that can be improved. It should be no less than 2,000 words and handed in next class. It must be said that Xia Yan's timing was very accurate. The bell rang the moment he had just assigned the homework. In his previous life, what he hated most was teachers who kept classes late, so he naturally would not do that. Xia Yan picked up the textbook and walked out of the classroom. A moment later, a cry of grief was heard in the classroom. Although Xia Yan's class is very interesting, there are too many homeworks. A 2,000-word paper, and it has to be handed in the day after tomorrow. This is going to cost them their lives. The little ninjas were in mixed feelings, and they loved and hated Xia Yan. Sarutobi Paiwako, who was sitting in the last row, wanted to discuss the content of the class with Xia Yan after class. As a result, as soon as she stood up, she was surprised to see Xia Yan running away like a flash of smoke, and couldn't help shaking her head and laughing. Chapter 9 Obito's determination. Xia Yan became famous. His unique ceiling technique class quickly became the hottest topic in the ninja school. Even though a day had passed, the little ninjas were still happily discussing the details of the class. Those students who took this course became the center of various small circles and were constantly asked to repeat what they saw in class. Whether the six-path sage wore sunglasses, whether the Mako and the dog demon had an affair, whether the Onmyoji Shaozinan could become a master of ceiling techniques, the 3 uses of the clone technique, whenever Xia Yan's performance in class was mentioned, the little ninjas would be overjoyed and talk about it like the back of their hands. They were glad that they had taken this ceiling technique class. The students who did not take this course were now beating their chests and stamping their feet, regretting it so much that their intestines turned green. If Xia Yan were here, he would definitely help them express their feelings. There was once a wonderful course in front of me, but I didn't cherish it. I regretted it when I lost it. This is the most painful thing in the world. Many people hurriedly found their homeroom teachers and asked them in a rare flattering manner, "Do you think I still have a chance?" They were so humble just to apply for Xia Yan's ceiling technique class instead. I saw it very clearly from the front row. The six-path sage must have worn sunglasses. In the classroom of Class A of the first year, Uchiha Obito was sitting cross-legged on the podium, gesturing with both hands, describing the scene he saw for the nth time to the students who didn't go to class. The spit flying around, he actually had a bit of the demeanor of the third Hokage. He is worthy at being a man who wants to become a Hokage. There is a reason why Obito works so hard. As the last one in the class, although he is not excluded by his classmates, he has always been the object of everyone's ridicule. I didn't expect that I would become a hot commodity after attending a ceiling class. After hearing the rumors about that class, the students who didn't attend the class all found Obito, who was the most talkative, to ask about the situation. Our Chu brother would naturally not miss this opportunity. He quickly got into the state and began to tell his own experience proudly. He couldn't help but feel lucky in his heart. In fact, he was not interested in the ceiling class at all. After all, it sounded difficult. He just took this course to take classes with Lin. Unexpectedly, this became the most correct thing he did in his life. In order to make everyone enjoy it, Obito used all his skills and racked his brains to make the story more exciting. As the number of narrations increased, the pictures he painted became more and more exaggerated. For example, at this time, Obito was telling everyone his modified version of the six-path sage fighting the demons. Let's talk about the six-path sage wearing sunglasses. He was 8 feet tall and his waist was also 8 feet wide. The first sentence of the opening was a critical hit. A classmate in the crowd couldn't help but complain. Isn't he square? Obito opened his eyes wide. Square is square, come on, they're octagonal ones. Otherwise, how can he beat the demon who is 9 feet tall and 9 feet wide? So the legendary battle is actually 2 cubes colliding? Someone else complained. Great. Then write a few numbers from 1 to 6 on the 6 sides of their bodies, let them collide, and whoever has the largest number facing up at the end wins. Wow. Isn't that just rolling the dice? Obito scratched his head and felt that he seemed to have made up a bit too much, so he had to pretend that he didn't hear everyone's complaints and continued to talk. And at this moment, the six-path sage shouted, "Demon, do you know this treasure?" And then took out a rice cooker shining with colorful divine light. Students. And Obito said seriously, "This rice cooker is very famous. It is called the 9 heavens and 10 earths goddess of Mao's head shaking her head in fear thunderbolt golden lightning rice cooker. Once it is turned on, within 100 miles, all people, animals, shrimps, scales and fleas will be sucked into it and turned into a pot of white rice, and it can only be said that there are still too few entertainment activities in Konoha nowadays, and most of them are not suitable for children. For details, please refer to a certain Konoha sannin who does not want to reveal his name." So even if everyone knows that Obito is making up nonsense, they still listen with relish. Even Obito's inferior fan works are sought after by everyone. It is conceivable how much impact Xia Yan's class brought to the ninja school. Even Obito sighed in a somewhat exaggerated way while he was talking. It's a pity that you didn't go to class. No matter how detailed I explain, it's not even 1/10 as interesting as the live class." Although he said that it was a pity for everyone, there was always a sense of boasting in his tone. When he said this, his eyes kept glancing at a certain white-haired masked boy with dead fish eyes. The certain white-haired masked boy with dead fish eyes, that is, Hatake Kakashi, was sitting in the first row of seats by the window, with his right hand supporting his chin and looking out the window. His eyes were empty, and he didn't pay any attention to Obito at all. In the past, he might have chosen to tease Obito as a pastime. However, since the death of that man, Kakashi suddenly felt that he had lost interest in many things. It seemed that the whole world had become a lot darker. The only thing he wanted to do now is to become a ninja as soon as possible and use his actions to wash away the stigma that man brought to the family. For this reason, he has applied for early graduation. Unfortunately, although Baiwako-sama, the vice president, approved his application, he did not arrange an exam for him immediately, but asked him to take the exam with the graduates at the end of the semester. Although he was not very satisfied with this arrangement, Kakashi had no choice. Every minute and every second he spent in the ninja school was torture. He was too lazy to bother with Obito, who was the last one. As for the sealing technique class mentioned by Obito, Kakashi didn't care. As a genius of the Hatake clan, he had a clear understanding of his future path. As the saying goes, the best is the one that suits you. Is the sealing technique useful? Of course it is, but it also takes a lot of time to learn, and it is a late-stage skill, and the improvement in strength in the early stage is very small. For Kakashi, who is still in a rapid growth period, the cost-effectiveness is very low. He still has a lot of ninjutsu, physical skills, and illusions to learn, but he has no time to spend on sealing techniques. In fact, many famous ninjas in history only started to spend time studying sealing techniques to make up for their shortcomings after their strength reached a bottleneck. So even if people around him are enthusiastic about the sealing technique class now, Kakashi is not very interested. HMPH, a pretentious guy. Obito was angry when he saw Kakashi completely ignoring him, and he muttered in his heart. I don't know if it's because of their incompatibility, but the two of them disliked each other when they first entered the ninja school. But at least the previous Kakashi would quarrel with him, but now he can only put on a stinky face with a deep hatred. Don't think I can't see it because you are wearing a mask. Kakashi like this is not interesting at all. And there is another thing that makes Obito a little anxious. That is, he has heard that Kakashi will directly take the graduation exam at the end of this semester. Although he doesn't want to admit it, Obito knows that with Kakashi's strength, he will definitely pass the exam easily. This means that Kakashi only has this semester left in the ninja school. Thinking of this, Obito felt a little uncomfortable. It's not because of jealousy. Although Obito is not Kakashi's opponent now, he believes that as long as he awakens the Sharingan, he will be able to easily defeat Kakashi. It's a pity that the Sharingan cannot be opened whenever you want, at least he has no signs of opening his eyes now. Finally, Obito attributed this emotion to one thing. That is, when he first entered school, he boasted that he would defeat the genius Kakashi, but he has not succeeded until now. After Kakashi graduates, the two will lose contact, and it will be difficult to have a chance. Damn it, just once. Is there any way that I can defeat this guy Kakashi before the end of the semester? Just when Obito was thinking hard about how to defeat Kakashi, his fate was suddenly caught by someone. Obito. Have you finished your sealing technique homework? Obito's face froze, and he immediately put Kakashi's matter behind him. He realized at this time that he had been surrounded by a group of girls without knowing when. What about the audience around him who listened to his storytelling? So disloyal. Obito complained in his heart. The leading girl cracked her finger bones and said with a smile, "Don't forget, your homework score will affect the average score of our girls group. We kindly took you in, you can't let us down." It was obviously arranged by teacher Xia Yan. Obito couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. "Huh? What did you say?" The leading sister smiled more and more kindly. "No, nothing." Obito waved his hand quickly. "Yes, homework, I'm just a little bit short of finishing it, don't worry." Obito patted his chest to assure, but his eyes unconsciously drifted to other places. The leading sister looked at Obito suspiciously and said, "Then show us now, let the sisters check your homework." Obito's face immediately darkened. But before he could object, he saw the leading sister wave her hand, and the girls around him tacitly carried themselves and moved towards his seat. Yamdani Obito was very scared at this time. Thinking of the homework with only a title in his school bag, Obito felt desperate. Perhaps, this is the mood of those death row prisoners before going to the execution ground. Stupid Kakashi still looked out the window, but such a barely perceptible voice came from under the mask. Xia Yan, who was the center of everyone's topic, was in the quiet library at this time, and he didn't hear anything outside the window. He has been hiding here reading books since the class yesterday, and he has no idea what kind of impact he has brought to the ninja school. Although Xia Yan applied to consult the seal book donated by Mito-sama in the library. Unfortunately, Sarutobi by Waco did not approve it, saying that he had to wait until his internship was converted to a full-time job. Obviously, it was not just Xia Yan, the vice president also knew how to dangle carrots in front of people. Although Xia Yan was a little disappointed that he could not see those precious seal books for the time being. But the library also collected the old ninjutsu scrolls and various travel notes donated by the major ninja clans in the past, which also had many things worth learning from. The ancients' wild and unconstrained ninjutsu ideas can broaden Xia Yan's thinking. The common sense that the ancients thought was well known and written down casually may be precious secrets today. More importantly, the room knowledge that Xia Yan longed for may be hidden between the lines of these books. Because the rooms used in the sealing technique are themselves a kind of ancient characters. Xia Yan learned a fact based on the records. In ancient times, runes were used to control chakra and record knowledge. The two ways of using runes eventually led to the split of the rune language and took different paths. Runes used to record knowledge no longer need to be injected with chakra. At the same time, in order to facilitate writing and reading, the fonts have gradually been simplified and integrated with other characters. From a carrier of chakra, it has gradually changed to a tool for simply recording knowledge. In the end, it has evolved into the appearance of the common characters in the ninja world today. And the path of using runes to control chakra has not developed very well. For many years, the rune language has been squeezed out of the living space by the seal language, so that a lot of rune knowledge has been lost. In addition, the rune language has produced many irregular, deformed, and ambiguous runes in the difficult inheritance and development. This has caused a lot of trouble for later researchers, including Xia Yan. Xia Yan flipped through these ancient books in order to collect ancient characters that have not been completely simplified, combined with those deformed and incomplete runes, and reverse the original appearance of those runes. Xia Yan called them original runes. After years of hard work, Xia Yan now only has 233 original runes. There is still a long way to go before he can completely learn all the runes and even master the truth of chakra. Considering the future Third Ninja World War, Xia Yan did not dare to neglect and was determined to empty the library before leaving school. At this time, he was standing in front of the bookshelf, holding a book Postpartum Care for Ninja Dogs in his hand and flipping through it quickly. If someone passed by nearby, they would find that Xia Yan's eyes were glowing with a faint blue light at this time, which looked weird. Snap. After flipping through it, Xia Yan closed the book. As expected of the books donated by the Inuzuka clan, the contents inside were illustrated and eye-opening. Useless knowledge increased again. There was no knowledge about rooms or sealing techniques. But this was also normal. Looking for useful knowledge in these books was like panning for gold in the sand, with a low cost effectiveness. There were many new teachers who had the same idea as Xia Yan and tried to find treasures here. But they often spent a lot of time and returned empty-handed in the end. These books in the library were gradually regarded as useless by everyone. Xia Yan was not worried about this happening to him because he had special reading skills. After he put Postpartum Care for Ninja Dogs back on the bookshelf, he took out a book next to it and took a look at the title, Postpartum Care for Ninja Cats. It was actually a series of books. In order to avoid missing important information, Xia Yan still opened it and began to flip through it quickly. At the same time, his eyes glowed with a faint blue light, and his eyes opened and closed once every time he turned a page, making a slight clicking sound. The art of keeping images was also jokingly called the art of camera by Xia Yan. The principle of this technique is to use the eyes as a camera, and record the images seen in the storage space of the chakra metal ball through chakra. Xia Yan plans to record the books in the library in this way, and then use other means to organize and analyze them. Obviously, Xia Yan's statement of emptying the library is not just talk. Chapter 10 The Unlucky Teaching Assistant. Xia Yan's shadow retaining technique has a shortcoming. That is, when performing this technique, the rapid book-turning movements and the crazy blinking of eyes make Xia Yan look very neurotic. Even the library aunt who was originally sorting books nearby now dared not approach Xia Yan within a 5-meter radius. At this time, she was hiding behind that counter, secretly observing Xia Yan. She couldn't help but mutter in a low voice, "Oh my god, the curse of the sealing technique class is getting stronger and stronger." This library aunt, who didn't know which family she was related to, was obviously not a ninja. So she didn't know that she thought she was mumbling quietly, but Xia Yan actually heard it clearly. Xia Yan felt that his reputation was damaged. Maybe the curse of the sealing technique class is getting more and more outrageous. If you keep muttering like this, even if there is no curse, it will become a curse. Xia Yan resisted the urge to roll his eyes and continued to record the contents of the book in his hand. If possible, he didn't want to do performance art here. It's a pity that the books in this ancient book area cannot be borrowed even by teachers, and can only be checked here. It seems that this photography technique needs to be improved. Xia Yan felt a little strange. Why did he think it was a good idea to use his eyes as a lens and blinking as a shutter? Unfortunately, improvement is not something that can be done in a short time. So Xia Yan had to endure the surprised look of the library aunt and continue his book scanning business. After a while, "I've been looking for you for a long time, and you are here." The sudden loud voice interrupted Xia Yan's concentrated work. Turning his head, Xia Yan saw Mr. Ikaku appear at the entrance of the ancient books area, waving his hand and walking towards him. SHH. Seeing that it was Director Imano, the library aunt's courage returned, and she put her finger in front of her lips to silence him. She was submissive to Xia Yan, and hit Ikaku hard. "Please keep quiet in the library. If you want to talk, please go out and talk." Ikaku smiled embarrassedly, and then made a gesture of zipping up his mouth. Xia Yan quickly wrote down the last few pages of the guide to the evaluation of beast girls in his hand, closed the book and put it back on the bookshelf. Then he pointed to the door and asked Ikaku to talk outside. The two walked out of the library under the disgusted gaze of the library aunt. After leaving the library, Ikaku first made a gesture of unzipping his mouth, and then asked, "I can't find you anywhere these 2 days. Are you staying in the library all the time?" "So, Teacher Ikaku, do you have something to talk to me about?" Xia Yan rubbed his slightly sore eyes with his hands and asked. "Of course I have something to do." Ikaku saw that Xia Yan still looked like nothing happened, and said unhappily, "You are capable, kid. You quietly made a big news yesterday. Everyone in the school has been talking about your sealing class these 2 days. Isn't this a good thing?" Xia Yan didn't quite understand where the resentment in Teacher Ikaku's words came from. "Of course it's a good thing for you," Ikaku said with a glare. The rest of us teachers are in a terrible situation. Many students have applied to take your class instead. In order to deal with them, the teacher's office has been in a mess for the past 2 days. As a result, you, the key person, are sitting comfortably in the library reading books. I was obviously standing to read books, Xia Yan complained in his heart, but he didn't say it out loud, so as not to stimulate the weak heart of Teacher Ryukaku. The situation described by Teacher Ryukaku was actually beyond Xia Yan's expectations. Although the first sealing technique class he taught to students yesterday was specially designed to arouse everyone's interest. But Xia Yan didn't expect that everyone's high interest would become a problem. It seems that he still underestimated the attraction of the picture created by his projection technique to the little ninjas. After quickly sorting out the information in his mind, Xia Yan asked Teacher Ryukaku, "Then why are you looking for me now? You are not going to fire him, are you?" Then Xia Yan has to write a big word of submission to the curse of the sealing technique class. Speaking of business, Ikaku Umano also became serious, cleared his throat and said, "Because you were not here before, Waito-sama made the decision to arrange everything. Now I am just looking for you to inform you. There are mainly 2 things, it should be good news. First of all, some of the applications for those who want to change to the sealing technique class have been approved by Waito-sama. Because the number of people has increased, the school has also rearranged a large classroom for you. This is a treatment that other teachers don't have." Ikaku Umano said at the end, looking at Xia Yan with relief. Although he was still complaining about Xia Yan adding more work to him, he was actually proud of Xia Yan's activeness. After all, this was a student he taught. As for the fact that Xia Yan's sealing technique was not taught by him, Ikaku Umano chose to ignore it. Unfortunately, Xia Yan did not show excitement after hearing what he said. "That's it?" Xia Yan asked in a flat tone. "Did your salary increase?" Ikaku Umano's face froze. "No." Xia Yan spread his hands speechlessly. "How is this good news? There are more students to teach, and the workload is heavier, but the salary has not increased. Why do I feel like I'm losing out?" Ikaku Umano was speechless for a moment. What he said made so much sense, I was speechless. For a moment, such a thought actually appeared in his mind. "No." Ikaku Umano shook his head quickly, a little afraid that he was almost misled by Xia Yan's words. "Being a teacher is not for money," he said righteously. Ikaku Umano felt that as Xia Yan's former teacher, it was necessary to give him the last lesson and teach him what teacher ethics is. But before he opened his mouth, Xia Yan asked, "What about the second good news?" Xia Yan saw that Ikaku teacher was about to enter the preaching mode again, and hurriedly changed the subject to interrupt his spell reading. Ikaku Umano, who had just prepared a lot of words, was almost injured by Xia Yan's interruption. After finally calming down, he told her unhappily, "Also, because there are too many people in your class, Waito-sama is afraid that you can't handle it, so he arranged an assistant for you." "Assistant?" Xia Yan frowned slightly. He had never heard of assistants in ninja schools before, and he always felt that there was something fishy. And with such a person in the office, it would be inconvenient to do many things. So Xia Yan organized his words and refused. "Well, I think I'm still young and should be able to handle it. I'd better not be an assistant. I'd better leave the assistant to you, Mr. Ikaku. It's just right that I can have something to do with an assistant, and nothing else." Unfortunately, Mr. Ikaku rejected his refusal. "It's too late. Who told you to disappear before? And the assistant is here now, you should go and meet him first. I didn't expect that the ninja world also has the usage of 'I'm here now.'" Xia Yan felt helpless, knowing that he couldn't refuse Mr. Ikaku's refusal of his refusal. "So where is the teaching assistant you mentioned?" "Oh, I couldn't find you just now, so I asked her to wait for you in your office, so you should go back quickly." Ikaku just remembered this and urged Xia Yan, "Are you sure you let the teaching assistant go to my office?" Xia Yan's expression became a little strange. "Yes, I was worried that she couldn't get in, so I gave her the spare key." Ikaku replied. After that, he added, "By the way, I almost forgot to tell you that the other party is a girl, so don't be too rude." Unfortunately, Xia Yan didn't listen at all. When he learned that the teaching assistant went to his office, he suddenly had an ominous premonition. Subconsciously looking at the upper right corner of his vision, Xia Yan found that the message bar said there had accumulated several messages. When he opened it, every message was reminding Xia Yan that someone had entered his office. Obviously, someone triggered the perception barrier set by Xia Yan the day before yesterday. As for why Xia Yan didn't notice it just now, That was because he was so absorbed in reading that he didn't notice the news. It seems that this reminder function needs to be improved, and perhaps a sound reminder function should be added. Xia Yan thought subconsciously. No. Now is not the time to think about this. Xia Yan quickly remembered that the day before yesterday, when he set up the perception barrier, he also set up a binding barrier as a trap. Once someone enters the office without Xia Yan's consent, it will be triggered. Gan. Xia Yan didn't have time to think about it, turned around and walked quickly towards his office. Hey, Xia Yan, where are you going? Knowai Kak was stunned by Xia Yan's fast leaving back, and after a moment, he scratched his head and sighed. You ran so fast when you heard it was a girl. Young people are just impatient. The sealing teacher's office is not far from the library, so Xia Yan quickly rushed to the door. Seeing the office door open, Xia Yan's face became darker and darker. I hope she's okay, he prayed in his heart, took a deep breath, walked to the door of the office step by step, and looked inside. What came into his eyes was a scene that was unbearable to watch. A girl with long fiery red hair was hanging in the air in the office. The black and thick rope formed by rune magic was tightly binding her in the style of tortoise-shell binding. The girl's chest was heaving, her breathing was heavy, and her clothes were soaked with sweat. It was obvious that she had just struggled quite fiercely. However, judging from the dull expression in her eyes at this time, she should have given up. It reminded Xia Yan of the salted fish hanging on the wrap to dry. Xia Yan had a toothache. At this time, the girl also saw Xia Yan peeking at the door, and her pupils gradually became brighter, and the hope of being rescued was rekindled. She wanted to shout for help, but the first sentence she shouted subconsciously was, "Be careful. There is a trap in this office. I know, because I set it up." Xia Yan complained in his heart. But of course this is not the case in reality. Before he came to the office, he had actually made corresponding plans for various possible situations. Seeing that the girl didn't look very smart, Xia Yan decided to implement Plan 996 first and try to pass the buck. Oh no. Who is so wicked to set a trap in my office? Xia Yan shouted in shock, trying to act like a person who is completely unaware. Unfortunately, the performance was a bit exaggerated. Obviously, Xia Yan does not have the acting talent that is standard for time travelers. He has once again held the organization back. In fact, Xia Yan has always wanted to complain. God knows how those senior time travelers can play tricks and compete with various old foxes as soon as they travel through time. What did they do in their previous life? After listening to Xia Yan's words, the girl was naturally not convinced by Xia Yan's acting skills, but instead noticed the fact that this was his office. Is this your office? Then you are the new SEAL teacher. The girl was surprised at Xia Yan's youth, and then her eyes became a little resentful. Then this trap, Xia Yan said with wide eyes. How can you slander someone's innocence like this? I have been staying in the library these days to prepare for class, and I haven't had time to change the layout of my office. As he was talking, Xia Yan suddenly punched his palms together, as if he suddenly thought of something and suddenly realized it. It must be a seal trap left by the previous teacher. I don't know how you triggered it. The girl looked at Xia Yan with a suspicious look. Then how come you're okay? Could it be that the trap is specifically for girls? Xia Yan naturally thought of this and patched it up and said, maybe after the previous teacher left, no one maintained this trap, so it sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. Translated, it means, you're unlucky. The girl's face darkened. Although the situation Xia Yan said is indeed possible, she is not willing to accept the fact that she is an unlucky person. But the girl also knows that to set the trap is no longer the point. The most important thing now is to get herself out of trouble first. So she reluctantly accepted Xia Yan's statement and asked, can you help me remove this trap? Of course, no problem. Xia Yan agreed and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, it was temporarily passed. A moment later, in the SEAL teacher's office, Xia Yan was briefly introducing himself to the girl. Yushin Xia Yan, 16 years old this year, recently promoted to Special Genin, and took the position of SEAL teacher 2 days ago. Please give me more guidance in the future. The girl also introduced herself, although it sounded weak. My name is Uzumaki Kashina, 15 years old, Chunin, will serve as an assistant teacher of the SEAL class. Please give me more guidance. Is it really Uzumaki Kashina? Although Xia Yan had some doubt when he saw the red hair, when he really confirmed that the other party was the Uzumaki Kashina, his heart still stirred a little. He is 1 year older than Kashina, but because he was born earlier, he is actually 2 years older than the other party. When Kushina transferred to Konoha, he had already graduated and joined the sealing class, so the two had no intersection, so Xia Yan was not sure of her identity just now. Considering that Mito-sama is still alive, this means that Kushina has not yet become the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. I remember that before Kushina became the Jinchuriki, she would encounter a kidnapping incident, but I don't know if it happened. At the same time, judging from the fact that Kushina fell into his sealing technique trap, her sealing technique level is not as good as Xia Yan imagined. Was she careless? Or is her current level not as high as it will be in the future? Maybe I can try it later. After sorting out the information about Kushina in his mind, Xia Yan smiled and extended his hand to her. We are all novices in teaching, so let's work together to do a good job in the sealing technique class in the future. Okay. Kushina agreed, but did not shake hands with Xia Yan, but just stared at Xia Yan's hand. Xia Yan took his hand back embarrassedly and continued to try to find a topic. My teaching method is a little different from other teachers, so if you have any questions about this course in the future, you can always ask me. Is it okay to ask questions unrelated to the course? Kushina suddenly said. Of course. Then there is one. Please go ahead. How long will it take you to disarm the trap and let me down? Kushina, who was still hanging in the air, said with tears in her eyes. P.S. According to the timeline I referred to, Kushina was kidnapped in the 41st year of Konoha, which was the year before the plot of this book began. However, for the sake of plot arrangement, I postponed it for 1 year and put it at the end. After all, Kushina is the heroine of this book, and she can't be in love with Minato. What, you said that it would be more exciting that way? P.S. 2. Kushina was wearing a forehead protector when she was kidnapped, so don't say that she was kidnapped during the ninja school. I'm always criticized for this, and I'm helpless. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 11 is Uzumaki Kushina. I'm doing it. Xia Yan just waved his hand and casually replied to Kushina's question while she was still hanging in the air. At this moment, he was holding a wooden sculpture in his hand, analyzing the rune spells engraved on it with a focused look on his face. Details determine success or failure. In order to completely get rid of his suspicion, Xia Yan naturally could not show that he was very familiar with this trap. Therefore, after finding the wooden sculpture used to set the trap, he could only pretend to study it in his hand for a long time, and even took the time to introduce himself to Kushina in the middle. This sentence again. Kushina muttered with resentment on her face. It was clearly said that it would only take 3 minutes, but after 3 minutes, it took another 3 minutes, and after 3 minutes, it took another 3 minutes. It's almost 10 minutes, Teacher Xia Yan. Where did you come from, Uzumaki Nagahito? Xia Yan complained in his heart. He estimated that the time was almost right, and decided that it was time to rescue poor Kushina. So Xia Yan touched the runes carved on the wood carvings and pondered. The design of this magic circle is quite clever. After the trap is formed, it does not need to rely on these wood carvings to maintain it. So it is impossible to break this magic circle simply by destroying them. What can I do then? Kushina was so anxious that she jumped in the air like a pupa. Don't worry, I have roughly understood this magic circle. Xia Yan said confidently. This sealing magic circle integrates part of the sealing magic circle into a series of light arrays, and also adds some ideas of the designer. It is essentially a 2-stage magic circle trap. Its biggest feature is that in addition to the basic immobilization effect, the rune technique will also use the opponent's chakra to generate ropes to strengthen the binding force. As he spoke, he looked at Kushina, who was tied up tightly by the rune ropes, with a strange look in his eyes. How much chakra did you feed this magic circle to be tied up like this? Kushina felt a little uncomfortable when Xia Yan looked at her. Recalling what she had just experienced, she said with a face of embarrassment, "No wonder this trap only fixed my body at the beginning. When I tried to refine chakra to break through the magic circle, those rune spells became ropes to tie me up." Xia Yan shook his head secretly and was a little speechless. Sealing techniques are originally a means to defeat the strong with the weak, and especially used to deal with those powerful enemies that cannot be defeated. After all, if you can defeat them, just kill them with a knife, otherwise, would you keep them as boss and wait for the sequel? Especially because the runes used in sealing techniques are essentially the programming language of chakra, so sealing techniques are particularly good at dealing with opponents with huge amounts of chakra. The favorite thing of sealing techniques is to say no to those who think they have a lot of chakra. So it is not so easy for you, Kushina, to break through with your own chakra. If it were really that simple, those tailed beasts with unknown amounts of chakra would not have been sealed in the bodies of Jinchukuki until now. Miss, are you sure you are from the Uzumaki clan who are proficient in sealing techniques? Otherwise, how come you don't even understand this principle? In fact, Xia Yan just felt a little strange. In his impression, the sealing technique of Uzumaki Kushina should be quite amazing. How come she can't even break the trap he set up casually? Now it seems that we can only say that the Kushina in his impression is the perfect form several years later, and the current one is just in the growth stage where she hasn't even become a Jinchukuki yet. Moreover, Kushina, who is naturally jumpy, is actually not suitable for the style of sealing techniques that require careful thinking. It's just like asking Uchiha Itachi to play that 1,000 Years of Death. I'm afraid that Kushina hasn't put all her mind on the sealing technique at this time, so her attainments are not deep. Perhaps it's necessary to wait for Mito to die and become a Jinchukuki himself. After these great changes, Kushina can calm down and seriously study the sealing technique. In addition, she can communicate with the genius Minato named Case later, so Kushina can finally grow into the master of sealing techniques in Xia Yan's impression. Having said that, even though Xia Yan criticized Kushina's current sealing skills as worthless, this is in comparison with her future achievements. So in fact, her current level is not bad. At least after listening to Xia Yan's explanation, she can quickly understand the subtlety of this trap. What a genius design, I didn't lose unfairly this time. Kushina finally showed a relieved expression, feeling that she was not so embarrassed. If the embarrassment just now was 100 points, then the embarrassment now is only 90 points. Damn. It's still very embarrassing. Xia Yan heard the future master of sealing, Kushina, praising him, and the corners of his mouth curled up unconsciously. But he quickly reacted and quickly raised the wooden sculpture to cover his face. As a result, he heard Kushina sigh. It's a pity that the designer of this magic circle died too early. God is jealous of talents. ... Xia Yan put the wooden sculpture down again. He almost forgot that he had just put the blame on his dead previous teacher. In order to prevent Kushina from continuing to mourn him, Xia Yan quickly proposed a plan to remove the trap. I already have an idea. You can try to focus your chakra now and try not to be absorbed by those rune spells. Then I will try to cut them off from outside. In fact, as the caster of this magic circle, Xia Yan naturally has a simpler way to remove it. But he had to do it in a complete way. In order not to reveal any flaws, Xia Yan decided to use a more rough method to break the magic circle. Okay, I'll try it. Kushina agreed and closed her eyes. She began to concentrate on controlling the flow of chakra in her body, focusing it into a point and hiding it in the deepest part of her body. As Kushina moved, the rune ropes bound to her body began to dim and gradually showed signs of loosening. It really works. Why didn't I think of it just now? Kushina noticed the changes in the ropes on her body, and she immediately smiled, happy that she was about to get out of trouble. Xia Yan smiled secretly in his heart. As the saying goes, when you have a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail. Ninjas have been used to using chakra to solve all problems since childhood, and have long developed a path dependence on chakra. At the critical moment of being trapped in a trap, even if they think of a way to convert chakra, it is difficult for them to make up their minds to do so. After all, if there is no chakra to amplify the limbs of the body, ninjas are no different from ordinary people. If this method does not work, then they may die. This is also the most insidious part of the two-stage binding aid designed by Xia Yan. As time goes by, the rune rope that cannot absorb chakra begins to shrink and become thinner. I'm sorry. In order to save time, after getting Kushina's consent, Xia Yan stretched out the sword finger that condensed chakra, ready to directly cut off the rune rope wrapped around her. At this moment, Xia Yan's very familiar voice suddenly sounded outside the door. Xia Yan, Kushina, are you two getting along well? ! Chapter 12. Reputation damaged. Before the two could react, the office door suddenly pushed open. Xia Yan and Kushina subconsciously turned their heads to look at the door. As a result, they saw the Dean of Studies, Ikaku Umino, appearing at the door. The smile on his face gradually froze. Sorry to bother you. As soon as the voice fell, Ikaku Umino backed out at a speed that would make Minato Namikaze ashamed. The office door slammed shut again. Only the two people in the office were left staring at each other. Outside the door, Umino, who was barely standing with his back against the office door, was a little doubtful about his life. Did he open the door in the wrong way? Or was Xia Yan, the brat, playing tricks on him with his projection technique? Otherwise, there was no way to explain the scene he had just seen. Thinking of this, Umino couldn't help but recall the scene he had just seen. In the middle of the office, Kushina was hanging in the air, tied up in a strange way with black ropes. Xia Yan, who was standing at the side, was holding a wooden sculpture in his left hand, and his right hand was reaching out to Kushina. What shocked Umino the most was that Kushina actually looked forward to seeing Xia Yan reaching out to her. It was Umino who recalled the scene and quickly ruled out the possibility of projection. Because the scene was too realistic and could not be faked. So in this case, oh my god. What on earth are they doing in the office? Umino roared in his heart. Originally, he was a little worried about the two problem children getting together, and Xia Yan's hurried departure just now was also very unnatural. So Umino came over to take a look and reminded them to get along well. Unexpectedly, he just witnessed this amazing scene. At least they seemed to get along well. Umino tried to comfort himself. No wonder. Their behavior has crossed the line of getting along well. No, it has crossed countless bottom lines and rushed into the abyss with no bottom line. Are young people nowadays so playful? Umino said that although he didn't understand, he was shocked. What kind of play was that just now? How come even the rune of the ceiling technique was used? Xia Yan said before that ninjutsu has many uses in life. Is this what he meant? Should I learn the ceiling technique? I just want to learn another skill? No. With countless question marks in his head, Umino finally reacted. In broad daylight, these two people actually did such a vulgar act in the sacred ninja school. This is the biggest problem. As their former teacher, as the current dean of teaching, as their elder, as an ordinary person with normal XP, Umino felt that he had the responsibility to stop their behavior. Even if they would be disgusted by it. For a moment, Umino's thoughts were clear, and he felt that his realm had been sublimated a lot. Then he took a deep breath, put on an expression of being ready to die, and pushed the door open again. After a moment. So you were disarming the trap. You scared me. I thought you were. In the ceiling teacher's office, Umino was rubbing the back of his head and laughing with Xia Yan, trying to ease the embarrassment of the big mistake he had just made. Kushina, who was finally rescued, had just gone to the bathroom and was now walking in with a relaxed look on her face. She just happened to hear what Umino said and asked curiously, "Director Umino, what do you think we are doing?" Umino opened his mouth, but when he saw Kushina's innocent big eyes blinking, he couldn't say his dirty thoughts just now. Thought we were practicing ceiling techniques. Xia Yan looked down on Umino, but after thinking about it, he spoke up to help him out. Yes. That's it. Umino quickly grabbed the life-saving straw handed by Xia Yan and nodded hurriedly. And in a sense, he really thought they were practicing ceiling techniques, so it wasn't a lie. Really? Kushina was half believing and half doubting, always feeling that the two people's expressions were a little strange. Of course it's true. By the way, I have something else to do, so I'll leave first. Umino couldn't sit still anymore, and hurriedly left the ceiling office. At this time, only Xia Yan and Kushina were left in the office, and the atmosphere was a little awkward for a while. It didn't feel good when she was just thinking about how to escape the trap, but now Kushina recalled that she was tied up and hung upside down by Xia Yan, whom she just met, and she felt very ashamed. Xia Yan, as the culprit, was also a little uncomfortable next to the victim. He scratched his head and looked at the other person again. Kushina had just gone to the bathroom to tidy up her appearance, so she didn't look as embarrassed as before. She was about 1.5 meters tall, with cute facial features but still a little chubby. She was wearing a light yellow ninja uniform with a black belt tied around her waist. She was wearing black over-the-knee stockings, outlining the outline of the girl's slender and round calves. With waist-length fiery red hair tied up with a black headband, he looked full of youthful vitality. Xia Yan couldn't help but think of Minato Namikaze, whom he had met several times before, who looked similar to him. So why does Naruto look so ordinary when his parents are so good-looking? Is it because he was affected by the 9 tails in Kushina's body when he was in the fetal state? When Xia Yan was studying the ceiling technique, he found that chakra is not just pure energy, but a unity of energy and information. Chakra, which is a combination of physical energy and spiritual energy, actually contains a lot of information about the original body. The shadow clone technique creates a clone with an independent personality. The chakra of Naruto's parents forms a spirit with the memory of the original body, and a first-class ninja can understand the opponent's thought through a duel. These are all good examples. What's more terrifying is that chakra can also change a person's genetic information. Many bloodline limits can be inherited by the next generation after they are developed, which is the best proof. Then there is no need to say more about Naruto, who has been living in the same room with the Nine Tails for a long time. The terrifying amount of chakra of the Nine Tails is enough to turn Naruto into its shape if it leaks a little bit. That's how Naruto got the 6 whiskers on his face. No wonder every time Naruto is in danger, the Nine Tails curses but still lends chakra to Naruto proudly. It turns out that these chakras are full of fatherly love. Yushin, teacher. Kushina didn't know that Xia Yan was thinking about something very rude in his mind. Seeing that he looked like he was wandering in the void, she hesitated for a moment and called out tentatively. Xia Yan's random thoughts were interrupted by Kushina's voice. He blinked his eyes and came back to his senses. Please say it, and we're about the same age, just call me Xia Yan. Oh, then you can also call me Kushina. Kushina nodded, and then asked a little embarrassedly, actually, I want to ask, what should I do now? Yes, I almost forgot that the other party is an assistant teacher. Xia Yan pinched his chin and thought for a while. First, I need to understand your current level. Please wait a moment and let me give you a test paper. Chapter 13 Exam in the Sealing Technique Teacher's Office. Xia Yan, who was about to ask Kushina a question to see how good she was, said to her, it will take some time to ask questions, so just find a place to sit down first. By the way, do you want something to drink? Juice? Thank you. Kushina nodded quickly. She had been hanging in the air for a long time before, and her throat was so thirsty that it was almost smoking, but she was just embarrassed to say it. Now Xia Yan took the initiative to ask, and Kushina naturally did not refuse. But then she touched her hair and added, as long as it's not tomato juice. Hey, Kushina-san, don't hold a grudge against it just because you were called tomato before. In this way, you won't be able to eat famous dishes such as tomato scrambled eggs, tomato beef brisket, and tomato fried tomatoes. Is tomato considered a fruit? Xia Yan secretly complained in his heart, but agreed. No problem, as long as it's not tomato juice, right? After saying that, he stretched out his left hand and made a strange gesture. With a slight sound of a mechanism, a card ejected from his sleeve and was just caught between his index and middle fingers. Kushina looked at the card in Xia Yan's hand with curiosity. You can see that the card is covered with dense runes, and a large Malum character is written on the circular blank space in the center of one side. Xia Yan then put the card on the table and made a seal with his right hand. The next moment, a small ball of white smoke burst out from the card with a pop sound. After the white smoke dissipated, 2 cups of red drinks appeared on the table, and the mouths of the cups were still cold. Iced watermelon juice. After Xia Yan's fierce operation, he finally conjured up 2 cups of watermelon juice. Kushina opened her mouth slightly, and she didn't know what to say for a while. At this time, her thoughts were jumping back and forth between that's it and amazing. It was obvious at a glance that a very sophisticated technique was used, but the effect presented was so down to earth. I always felt a subtle sense of gap. If Mono Waikaku heard Kushina's thoughts, he would definitely feel the same way. He felt the same way when he saw Xia Yan using the barrier technique as an umbrella. Xia Yan didn't notice Kushina's strange expression and began to explain to himself. When I was doing missions outside, I liked to collect local specialties every time I went to a place. This is actually watermelon juice sold by a tea and fruit shop in Daimyo Prefecture. The tea and fruit there are too sweet and I don't like it. But the juice they sell is quite to my taste, so I packed a lot when I left. Seeing Kushina staring at the 2 cups of watermelon juice, Xia Yan added another sentence. Because it is sealed with a sealing technique, there is no need to worry about the problem of spoilage. You can drink it with confidence. After saying that, Xia Yan picked up a cup of watermelon juice and took a sip, then sat down with it and began to look for a pen and paper, preparing to give Kushina a few questions on the spot. Seeing this, Kushina also held another cup of watermelon juice and drank it. The sweet and delicious red juice slid into her burning throat, making her feel cool all over. The fatigue just now was swept away, and she couldn't help burping in comfort. Kushina quickly came to her senses, her face slightly red, and she looked at Xia Yan with a guilty look. She found that the other party was concentrating on the questions and didn't see her previous loss of composure, so she quietly breathed a sigh of relief. But she didn't know that Xia Yan, who was concentrating on the questions, had a slight smile on his face at this time. Kushina then looked at the blank card on the table curiously, and there was no big surprise in her eyes. Although the shape and style are a little different, this card is essentially a sealing scroll, so she is naturally familiar with it. However, it is not easy to make a sealing scroll so small. Sure enough, this teacher Xia Yan is also very powerful. He is really comparable to the previous sealing teacher who can set up a 2-stage binding trap. Are the sealing teachers in the ninja school all monsters? And he is about the same age as me. Kushina felt a little frustrated. Sure enough, is Xia Yan the genius of sealing technique that Mito's grandmother said? Although a little frustrated, Kushina quickly adjusted her mentality. She was actually not very interested in sealing techniques, but only learned it because of the mission she was responsible for. So she didn't have much competition with Xia Yan. Compared with Xia Yan's sealing skills, Kushina was actually more interested in Xia Yan's experience. After learning that Xia Yan had been to many places, she couldn't help but show envy on her face. That's great, I haven't been out much since I came to Konoha, I'm so bored. Kushina has a very special chakra in the Uzumaki clan, and has a strong suppressive power on the tailed beasts, so she has always been regarded as the first choice for the second nine-tailed Jinchuriki in the future. Therefore, even after graduating from the ninja school and becoming a formal Konoha ninja, she can only wander around Konoha and cannot leave Konoha. Especially recently, as the first generation of the nine-tailed Jinchuriki, Mito-sama began to become weak, and Kushina was confined to Konoha, and at most she was allowed to do some trivial D-level tasks in the village. Kushina, who was naturally lively, naturally hated this. Compared with such boring days, the life in the ninja school, which was once excluded, was marked with a 10-level beauty filter and became exciting and colorful. At least at the time, you could beat up some little brats every day to pass the time. So when she got a job opportunity as an assistant teacher, Kushina accepted it without hesitation. Hearing Kushina's complaints, Xia Yan responded casually while writing questions on paper. Then I am the opposite of you just now. I rarely go back to the village after graduation, but I miss it a little. Following this topic, the two chatted casually. Xia Yan told Kushina about several interesting things that happened when they were on missions, and Kushina told Xia Yan about what happened in the village in the past few years. The two became a little familiar. Not long after, Xia Yan handed out the test paper. So he stood up and handed the test paper and pen to Kushina, and said at the same time, "The questions get harder as you go on, so don't force yourself to finish them all. There is no time limit. Just tell me when you're done." Okay. Kushina drank the watermelon juice in one gulp, then sat up straight, picked up the pen and started to look at the questions. The first question was a phonetic question, which required you to mark the pronunciation of the runes drawn on the test paper. This was considered the basic skills of the sealing technique, so Kushina naturally answered it quickly. Then the second question was a fill-in-the-blank question, which required you to fill in the missing runes according to the context of the rune formula. It was indeed much more difficult than the first question. However, Kushina, who was trained in a professional school, recognized that these rune formulas were taken from a series of light arrays after just a few glances, so she easily solved the problem. After finishing this question, Kushina's confidence began to increase greatly. Judging from this trend, even if the difficulty of the following questions increases, it should not be that difficult. Kushina encouraged herself. Yoshi. I must perform well and save my image. Then, Kushina quickly answered several questions, unstoppable. Even though that difficulty of the questions was gradually increasing, Kushina did not stop. Until she saw the question. Now there are pheasants and rabbits in the same cage, with 35 heads on top and 94 legs below. How many pheasants and rabbits are there? Kushina. Thanks to book friend 160701909010568, Fishing Alone by the River, Prelude to the Death of the Dead, Ricardo Liu, book friend 20220413065552141, Lone Wolf, Silence Ao, CK, -21, 4SS. 201908113 Sunrookie, book friend 20201204113 2924108. Heller's boning knife, chain cubed 381, pick the hard guest, and currently DA Sutter's recommendation votes. Thanks to Lone Wolf and Doi and Joshi for their monthly votes. Chapter 14 Teaching Aids. Time went back a little more than 10 minutes ago. Xia Yan handed the test paper to Kushina, and when she started to answer the questions, he returned to his seat and took out the textbook to prepare for tomorrow's class. In the quiet office, the only sound that could be heard for a while was the rustling of the pen. After a few minutes, the rustling sound of the pen began to be intermittent. Then as time passed, the intervals between the pen sounds became longer and longer. After a while, the sound of the pen could no longer be heard. Xia Yan looked up. At this time, Kushina leaned back in the chair, her hands hanging down, her eyes staring at the ceiling empty. Her whole body seemed to have lost color, as if she had burned her life to ashes. It seems that she has reached her limit. Are you done? Xia Yan put down the textbook and stood up and walked over. Wait a minute. I'm about to calculate how many chickens and rabbits there are. Xia Yan's words scared Kushina, and she hurriedly lay on the test paper, as if she was afraid that Xia Yan would snatch the paper away. It seems that she is stuck on the chicken and rabbit problem. Xia Yan was somewhat speechless. This question requires you to design a rune formula to solve this problem. It's useless to just calculate the answer. It seems so. Kushina then remembered that this paper was about sealing techniques, not mathematics. After realizing this fact, she was suddenly overwhelmed with grief, holding her head and shouting, "Then why did I calculate for so long just now?" After struggling for a while, Kushina finally chose to give up. After she handed the test paper to Xia Yan, she collapsed on the table like a deflated ball. Xia Yan smiled slightly and began to roughly flip through the entire test paper. He found that there was no need to look at the specific answers at all, and a lot of information could be seen from Kushina's handwriting. It can be seen that as the difficulty of the questions increases, Kushina's handwriting changes from the beginning of confident and flowing, to hesitant strokes. In the end, the handwriting has become crooked and difficult to recognize. Xia Yan looked carefully for a long time before he could see the words between the lines. The second half of the paper had 2 words written on it, no. Now he roughly understood Kushina's true level. In simple terms, she had solid basic skills and could recite various basic techniques by heart. Obviously, she had worked hard. Unfortunately, she could only recite from the book when it came to application. She probably rarely tried to design techniques by herself, so she was at a loss when asked to design a technique to solve the problem. For example, the essence of the chicken and rabbit in the same cage problem is a quadratic equation, which is actually used in many sealing techniques. If Kushina was given those problems to do, she would definitely be able to do it. As a result, Xia Yan just put clothes on it, and Kushina didn't recognize it. Hey, why does this metaphor look familiar? In short, the test results are similar to what Xia Yan had guessed before. It can be seen that Kushina has no enthusiasm for sealing techniques, but is forced to learn because of her mission as a future Jinchuriki. Xia Yan seemed to be able to see the scene of little Kushina memorizing various rune techniques with a sad face under the supervision of Mito-sama. Did I do badly on the test? Kushina asked a little nervously. Xia Yan stared at the test paper for a long time, which made her feel guilty. Xia Yan came back to his senses and smiled. For your current age, it is already very good. You have a good grasp of the basic knowledge, and you didn't fall into some of the small traps I designed. Although she fell into a big trap when she just came to the office. Kushina felt relieved when she heard Xia Yan's praise. She touched her head a little embarrassedly, but she soon reacted. Aren't you, Yushin Xia Yan, about the same age as me? I'm very good like this, so aren't you on top? Teacher Xia Yan, are you really not beating around the bush to praise yourself? Moreover, Kushina was a little frustrated and said, I don't know how to answer many of the questions at the end. That's normal, because the questions at the end are no longer within the scope of normal sealing techniques. Xia Yan explained, it's my own style. I personally think that runes should not be limited to sealing techniques, but can be used to solve more problems, whether in combat or in life. So the application questions at the end of the test paper are all life problems that require the flexible use of rune techniques to solve. I see, Kushina nodded as if she understood, but in her heart she was thinking that keeping chickens and rabbits in the same cage was not a bullshit life problem. Before counting how many chickens and rabbits there were, shouldn't there be a more important question? Why do we keep them together? Xia Yan naturally didn't know what Kushina was thinking, and thought she didn't quite understand, so he simply suggested, "It just so happens that I have to prepare the teaching aids for the next class. If you come to help make them, you should be able to understand what I mean a little bit." Teaching aids? Kushina's eyes lit up and she immediately became alert. Is it related to the projection technique you used in your first class? After she came to school today, she heard everyone discussing the legendary first class, and she has long been curious about projection. Not to mention that her position as a teaching assistant was temporarily added because Xia Yan's course was too popular. In response to Kushina's question, Xia Yan nodded and said, "This teaching aid does involve the principle of projection in its use, but although it is used to stimulate everyone's interest, the focus is somewhat different from the images I show to students in class." As he spoke, he took out a storage card and put it on the table to unseal it. With the explosion of white smoke, a cardboard box full of small pieces of paper appeared, and there were two strange-shaped machines. Xia Yan first took out a large stack of paper from the box and handed it to Kushina. Kushina took it and looked at it, and found that it was somewhat similar to the storage card Xia Yan used before. However, Xia Yan's previous cards were made of good material and looked very valuable. These cards are made of two pieces of paper glued together. One side is ordinary hard cardboard, and the other side is a yellow paper with poor paper quality, which reminds her of similar things. Is this the talisman paper used for practicing drawing runes? Kushina hesitated. Yes. Xia Yan nodded, not surprised that Kushina could guess it. The paper used to make talismans and scrolls needs to use a lot of special materials in order to conduct and carry chakra. The more powerful the spell you want to use talismans and scrolls, the more precious materials you need to use to make them, and the higher the price. A novice who has just started learning the sealing technique, even if he has a mine at home, can't use ordinary talisman paper to practice every time. And ordinary paper can't test whether the chakra is infused in place when constructing the rune formula. So the predecessors invented a kind of talisman paper for practice. The main material of this kind of talisman paper is those inferior materials that can conduct chakra but cannot carry too much chakra. Its characteristic is that it can draw the rune formula, but it can't actually be used. Because the excessive chakra before the formula is formed will destroy the entire rune, resulting in the failure of the spell. Although it has no practical use, it is completely fine to practice drawing runes, and of course the most important thing is that it is cheap. Xia Yan held a card and explained. This side is a talisman paper made of a special kind of rush from Imaka village in the land of grass is the main material. Compared to ordinary practice talisman paper, this Imaka grass paper is more durable, so I bought a lot of it, and it just happened to be used this time. Kushina also picked up a card curiously and looked at it, and found that there were some things printed on the talisman paper. You can see that in the box that occupies most of the paper, a basic rune formula is drawn, but it is not complete, and one or two key runes are missing. Thinking of the questions in the test paper just now, Kushina easily thought that this was also a fill-in-the-blank question. Maybe completing the rune can trigger some function. Kushina couldn't help thinking. And in the rectangular box at the bottom of the paper, there are some normal words printed. But Kushina is getting more and more confused the more she looks at it. Because she knows every word on it, but she can't understand it when they are connected. It was written. First Hokage, Senju Hashirama cost 7, attack 7, HP 10 tree world birth. When entering the field, change the field to forest, and at the beginning of the turn, deal 1 damage to all units on the opponent's field wood clone. Consume 4 HP and summon 2 wood clone, April 7, 2001, to the field introduction. The leader of the Senju clan, he pacified the troubled times with the secret technique of wood release. Together with Uchiha Madara, he founded the Hidden Leaf Village and became the first Hokage. At the first 5-Kage conference, the tailed beasts were evenly distributed to the 5 major countries, and the ninja world also achieved a brief peace for the first time. He defeated Uchiha Madara in the valley at the end, and died of illness several years later. He was hailed as the god of ninja by the world. Chapter 15 Special Uses of the Jewel Disc. Kushina was no stranger to the character of Senju Hashirama. The wood-release ninja who pacified the troubled times, the first Hokage, the god of ninjas. Compared to these vague and unreal titles, Kushina was more familiar with him as Mito's husband. Although Kushina had never met this man, she often heard Mito's husband complaining about her dead husband. She said he was a two-timing gambler. But she could still capture the deep nostalgia in her grandmother's eyes when she said these words. Kushina came back to her senses and continued to study the cards. Putting aside the name and introduction, what do these cost, attack power, and life points mean, and what is the relationship with the rune formula above? Kushina was puzzled and simply picked up a few more cards to look at. Sarutobi Sasuke, Hyuga Tennin, Uchimebara, E2, Bakuren, Shodai, Ishigawa. Obviously, they are all legendary ninjas active in the Warring States period, and even the former patriarch of the Uzumaki clan, Uzumaki Ashina, appears among them. In addition, there are some cards introducing ninjutsu, illusion and taijutsu, which also have those meaningless words on them. Kushina couldn't help her curiosity and asked Xia Yan directly, "What are these cards for?" Seeing that she was so anxious, Xia Yan didn't keep her in suspense and gave a simple and clear answer. Play. Play? Seeing that Kushina still couldn't figure it out, Xia Yan had to explain. Yes, it's not a profound thing. I just combined the practice of drawing runes with a small game to see if I can make the boring practice more interesting. After listening to Xia Yan's words, Kushina couldn't help but think of the introductions of those characters and Xia Yan's projection technique, and suddenly an idea came to her. Could it be that completing the rune spell will result in the projection of the character corresponding to the card? Xia Yan nodded to indicate that she guessed correctly. Kushina chuckled, a little proud. At the same time, she quickly thought that this game was indeed interesting for the little ninjas. It was enough as a teaching aid to motivate everyone to learn. And after learning about Xia Yan's idea, Kushina suddenly felt a sense of jadu, and slapped her forehead with a sound of ah. How could I forget this? When I first started learning the sealing technique, Grandma Mito often made similar things for me. As long as I completed the missing runes, the rune paper would fold itself into various origami toys, which was fun. Looking back, it was really a painful and happy day. And aren't these cards made by Xia Yan similar to Grandma Mito's origami? Is this the brain circuit of geniuses? Newbie Shiverin.jpg Kushina looked at Xia Yan with mixed feelings, a little envious. I didn't expect that Mito-sama had the same idea as me. Xia Yan couldn't help but raise his eyebrows after hearing Mito's operation, a little surprised. But what really surprised him was that Kushina actually used normal rune paper to practice drawing runes, otherwise it would be impossible to successfully perform the spell into origami. Really rich Xia Yan has always felt that even if the family has a mine, they can't afford to practice like this. Unexpectedly, he would be slapped in the face here, and Kushina's unintentional verse showed off. It turns out that poverty limits his imagination. It's great to be rich. Xia Yan looked at Kushina with mixed feelings, a little envious. For a while, the two looked at each other, staring deeply at each other, without a trace of impurities in their eyes, only the deep envy of the poor students for the top students, and the poor for the rich women. But soon the two of them interrupted their strange staring. Because Kushina suddenly thought of another question. But Xia Yan, these runes should not be able to complete the spell, right? Although the projection technique is said to be just the simplest combination of the clone technique and the transformation technique, it is not difficult. But such a crude talisman paper still can't stand its tossing. Xia Yan also came back to his senses and said mysteriously, because these cards are not really used for casting spells. As he said that, he picked up one of the two strange wooden machines he had just taken out. Under Kushina's gaze, Xia Yan put his wrist on the disc part of the machine. It can be seen that after putting it on, a sickle-shaped plate extending outward from the disc is just parallel to the arm, which does not affect the movement. There are also several square grooves on the plate, which are exactly the same size as those cards. As soon as Xia Yan put on the machine, he felt his second-year soul begin to burn. But he quickly suppressed it and explained to Kushina, this dual disc is the key to turning those cards from decay into magic. Yes, the dual disc that Xia Yan mentioned is actually very similar to the one that appeared in Yu-Gi-Oh!, but it has no transformation function for the time being, and it is in an unfolded state at the beginning. However, the mini-game that Xia Yan mentioned before is not an imitation of the gameplay of Yu-Gi-Oh! After all, he just wanted to use this game to make the little ninjas less resistant to practicing drawing runes. But he didn't intend to let them become heavy card players and spend too much time on this game. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be able to pass the level of the vice principal. So compared to the more complicated rules of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Xia Yan chose the simple and easy-to-learn Hearthstone as a template, and used the characters of the Warring States period as roles to create such a card game. The name was to take advantage of the card game that was popular in the ninja world in Naruto, so it was also called Genin. Kushina was a little surprised when she heard that the dual disc was related to those cards. So these two things are not weapons. She was actually a little concerned about these two strange-shaped machines just now. But because they looked like weapons, she didn't dare to ask more. Unexpectedly, they were actually related to the game that Xia Yan mentioned. Kushina's words made Xia Yan want to laugh. If they're really weapons, then why did I put them next to those cards? Maybe, to save space. Kushina said weakly, after all, they do look like weapons. How could that be? Xia Yan's first reaction was to refute. How can this thing be a weapon? I summoned the dual disc in attack mode and attacked the opponent directly. However, after being told by Kushina, Xia Yan still subconsciously looked at the dual disc on his wrist. Hey, you know what, it really looks like it. Putting aside the fixed mindset, Xia Yan felt that this dual disc looked very similar to the Erdeki war blade that appeared in World of Warcraft, or it could be compared to a blade and oriental stick. It's just that they're held in the hand, while the dual disc is worn on the wrist. Why didn't I think of this before? I'm afraid that I have watched thousands of episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh! In vain. Because of inertial thinking, Xia Yan only thought of it as a toy before, and never thought of weaponizing it. Reminded by Kushina, Xia Yan's mind was opened for a while, and inspiration came like a spring. Dual disc plus Odachi warp blade, is there any point? If the ninjutsu used in actual combat is drawn on the card in the form of runes, and selected according to the situation, if a blade is added to the edge of the dual disc, no, chakra metal is directly used to make a chakra knife, or it is directly made into a gauntlet to enhance the shield-breaking ability. An unprecedented weapon quickly took shape in Xia Yan's conception. At this time, Kushina didn't know that her casual words would lead to the birth of a new profession in the future. They manipulated the terrible weapon called the actual combat dual disc, and used a new fighting method of playing cards and beating people at the same time, which frightened the entire ninja world. Because they were considered by the world to have gone against the right way of card games and walked in the dark. In order to distinguish them from players who play ordinary card games. Later, people called these people, dark duelists. Chapter 16 Duel. In the office of the sealing technique teacher. Xia Yan, who didn't know what kind of bloody storm his invention would bring, was introducing the use of cards and dual discs to Kushina. He first took out a card from his pocket and showed it to Kushina. The rooms that were supposed to be vacant on it had been filled in. Then Xia Yan slapped the card into the card slot on the dual disc. A hearty male voice suddenly rang out in the office. Everyone trusts me, I trust everyone too, this is the Okage. Without any signs, a man wearing red-layered armor and posing in a combat posture appeared in front of Xia Yan. Although she was mentally prepared, after seeing the man's appearance clearly, Kushina still opened her mouth slightly and was a little surprised. After all, the man's appearance was very similar to what she saw on the Okage every day. Yes. This is the legendary god of ninjas, and a two-timing gambler, Senju Hashirama. Is this what the first Okage, grandfather looks like? After being surprised, Kushina's curiosity gradually took over, and she began to circle around the projection of Hashirama Senju. She looked here and there. In the end, she even touched it, but as expected, it passed through her body. It was just a phantom, not a real entity. After satisfying her curiosity, Kushina tilted her head and pointed at her chin with her slender index finger to make a comment. Isn't he as handsome as I imagined? I wonder what Grandma Mito likes about him. Hey. Kushina-san. You've been studying this for so long, and this is what you've been looking at. Xia Yan couldn't help but twitch his mouth. And where does your inexplicable hostility towards the first Okage come from? You haven't even met each other, have you? Seeing Xia Yan's strange expression, Kushina remembered the business, and walked to Xia Yan's side with a hey and checked the card that was slapped on the dual disc. As a result, she was surprised to find that after using this card, the room paper part was not damaged, but the room that had been filled in before disappeared. I understand. Kushina suddenly became like Conan, a flash of lightning flashed through her mind, and she suddenly realized. The real projection technique is this dual disc, which must have the corresponding room formula drawn inside. The rooms on the card only serve as a trigger and do not participate in the formal construction of the formula, so even such a low-quality room paper can withstand it and can be reused continuously. She clasped her hands together and analyzed excitedly. It's not as exaggerated as repeated use. This kind of use will still cause damage to the talisman paper. I tested it and found that various problems began to appear after about 20 times, and it was completely scrapped after 30 times. Although I designed a chakra diversion circuit in the dual disc to make it more durable, the components inside will still gradually wear out. In fact, it can only reduce the material cost that students need to consume in the early stage to about a quarter. Xia Yan corrected Kushina's statement, and then praised her, but you arrived in other places. You are worthy of being a disciple of Mito-sama. Since knowing that Kushina is an invisible rich woman, Xia Yan decided to be gentle to her. No, Xia Yan, you're amazing for thinking of reusing the talisman paper in this way. Kushina sighed. No, actually this method has many flaws. For example, it can only practice a small part of the rune ritual. It's amazing that you can understand it so quickly, Kushina. No, I just thought of it according to your thinking, Xia Yan. You who invented this method are the genius. No. Okay, let's not praise each other like this. In order to end the meaningless humility, Xia Yan waved his hand and suggested, why don't we use this game to determine the winner? Whoever wins, the other party is the real genius. Isn't this prize a bit strange? Kushina wanted to complain, but her attention was quickly attracted by other words. Determine the winner. Kushina's eyes gradually widened. Does this game have other ways to play besides projecting characters? ... So you always thought that what you just showed was the entire content of this game. What kind of shit is this? Even a company's games will not just let players watch. At least you can choose the posture. As expected, there are too few entertainment activities in the ninja world. Even projecting a person is considered a fun game by her. If there were such toys that can only project people in the previous life, I guess he would buy them all. Then he could project Summoned and sit on a stool to watch her for a whole day. It would be so wonderful. Shaking his head to put the strange idea behind him, Xia Yan said, it's too troublesome to introduce it. Let's just start a game to demonstrate. Okay. Kushina nodded expectantly. So Xia Yan took out a deck of cards and handed it to Kushina along with another jewel disc on the table. He took out the card of Hashirama Senju and led Kushina to a relatively empty corner of the office. Then he took out another deck of cards and inserted it into the corresponding position on the jewel disc. Kushina followed suit and put on the jewel disc and inserted the deck in a hurry. After seeing Kushina making an okay gesture to indicate that she was ready, Xia Yan explained. In order to identify the duel partner, both of you need to shout duel at the same time at the beginning of the game, which means duel. Then why not just use duel? Kushina asked. Because the word duel is sometimes used in daily life, and at the time it may be accidentally triggered, Xia Yan explained a little unconfidently. After all, he couldn't explain that he just designed it this way because of a burst of his Chingibu spirit. As a result, Kushina actually believed it and looked at Xia Yan with sympathy. Xia Yan, what kind of daily life did you live in the past? Sure enough, what the third-generation grandfather said to her was true. The people outside the village were living in dire straits. In order not to evoke Xia Yan's sad memories, Kushina hurriedly asked Xia Yan to tell her how to pronounce it. So an impromptu English class began. Duel. Xia Yan said in a clear voice. Lost. Kushina tilted her head and imitated. It's duel. Xia Yan corrected. Duel. It's duel. 10 minutes later. It seems that we need to add a function that can identify opponents without voice controlling the future. Xia Yan wiped his sweat and muttered to himself. Fortunately, Kushina finally learned it. The two stood a few meters apart again, each of them made a pose, and after counting down 3, 2, and 1, they shouted at the same time, duel. The duel officially began. As soon as the two finished speaking, Kushina saw a big number suddenly appear above Xia Yan's head. 20, and there was a phantom of a copper coin next to it. She subconsciously looked up and found that she had the same thing on her head. The number on the head is the life value of each player. If it drops to 0, it means losing. Xia Yan began to explain. The copper coins next to it represent the cost you need to pay when you play a card. The maximum value will increase by 1 point each round, up to 10 points. At the same time, any unused cards will be cleared at the end of each round. You can think of the players as hired ninjas to fight, and the copper coins are the hiring fees. Now let's each draw 5 cards. After the two drew 5 cards, Xia Yan said, when the duel starts, the duel disc will randomly determine who will go first and who will go first. This time I'm going first, so I'll just show you a demonstration. You can draw 1 card at the beginning of each round, but for the sake of balance, the first player can't draw cards in the first round. Xia Yan took a look at the cards in his hand, then drew a card and slapped it on the duel disc. The next moment, a short figure with the same silver curly hair as him appeared in front of him. Yushin Xia Yan, Genin cost 1, attack 1, HP 2 no effect. I'm holding the organization back again. Introduction. An ordinary Genin. No one thought that he would become the inventor of this game in the future and put himself into the game. PFFT Kushina felt familiar with the silver curly hair at first sight, and couldn't help laughing after reading the introduction. Xia Yan, why did you make yourself into a card character? There's no other way. Most historical figures are not suitable for such low-cost cards. Xia Yan said helplessly, instead of making one up, I might as well do it myself. In fact, I also plan to make students into this game in the future, as a reward for the top few in the sealing technique exam. The interlocking design made Kushina unable to find the right words to describe Xia Yan for a while. If Xia Yan used what he said in his previous life, it would be like an old sow wearing a bra, one set after another. Xia Yan continued to explain. If there is no special effect, all units will need to wait for a round before they can attack, and then it's your turn. After that, Xia Yan announced the end of the round. Okay. Kushina responded with a fist. She had just watched Xia Yan's demonstration and felt that this game was quite simple, so she drew a card with confidence and began a pleasant journey of exciting ninja. It's my turn, draw a card. Chapter 17 Another round. More than an hour later, a thud. Kushina. Or she was acting like this for no other reason than that she had lost 10 games in a row to Xia Yan. 10 games. Is this the strength of the inventor of this game? Kushina gasped. Obviously, everyone's decks were exactly the same, and the rules of the game were not difficult. She got the hang of it quickly after playing a few games. But Xia Yan was still standing in front of her like an insurmountable mountain, and she couldn't defeat him. As Xia Yan said just now, this game is really easy to learn but difficult to master. Kushina understood something. What cards to choose in each round, the order of playing cards, the prediction of the opponent's hand, and of course the factor of luck. It was these inconspicuous details that accumulated and eventually led to the tilt of the balance of victory and defeat. This game is quite interesting. The chess and card games on the market today are either slightly higher threshold like shogi, or rely entirely on luck like those gambling games. And this keening game has a good balance between luck and skills, allowing everyone to easily get started without lacking depth. It's no wonder that after losing so many games, Kushina still feels itchy and wants to play another game. And she feels that she has gradually found a trick. In the last few games, she has been able to fight back and forth with Xia Yan. It seems that she has good talent, and Kushina is a little proud. According to this trend, if she plays a few more games, if she is lucky, she may be able to defeat Xia Yan. I can kill him. With this idea, Kushina finally adjusted her mentality and stood up, yelling to Xia Yan eagerly. Let's play another game. Kushina-san, why don't we stop here today? Xia Yan on the opposite side wiped his sweat, looked helpless, and began to regret his decision to teach Kushina to play keening. When Kushina heard this, her expression was as if she had heard that Christmas was cancelled, and she said pitifully, Don't, Xia Yan, you can't run away after winning. I just figured out how to play this game. No, you didn't. Xia Yan complained crazily in his heart. Perhaps it was because she always played with Summon that Kushina's card skills were so terrible. And she didn't know it at all, and she was defeated again and again. People who were addicted to being backed like her. Can I kill back? It's just an illusion. Xia Yan wanted to let her win several times, but she couldn't seize the opportunity. I gave you a chance, but you were useless. With Kushina's attitude of not giving up until she wins her game. If she continues to fight like this, when will it end? In order to win this meaningless battle, Xia Yan had to tell the truth. In fact, I don't have much chakra. Kushina can also feel it yourself. This dual disc consumes the player's chakra when playing. Huh. Is that so? Why don't I feel anything at all? Kushina said with a surprised face. Puff. Kushina's casual words were like a knife stabbing Xia Yan's heart. But this is not over yet. Kushina subconsciously continued. Xia Yan, you were not able to do it so soon. The tone was quite surprised. The subtext is, your chakra is too little, puff. Another knife. Xia Yan covered his chest and almost spit out a mouthful of blood. Not having enough chakra has always been a pain in Xia Yan's heart. Is having more chakra a big deal? It seems to be really great. After all, chakra is a combination of spiritual energy and physical energy, so more chakra means good physique and strong mental power, and you get the ticket to become a strong person as soon as you were born. Even when practicing ninjutsu, more chakra means more practice every day. Not to mention the official plugin tailored for people with more chakra, the shadow clone technique. Yes, don't look around, I'm talking about you, Grandpa Ming. As the saying goes, genius is not scary, what's scary is that genius works harder than you. As long as you have more chakra, it means that you have directly gathered the two major elements of success. I just want to ask you if you were afraid. Xia, whose brain circuit is a bit too long, finally realized that she said the wrong thing and poked Xia Yan's sore spot. She covered her mouth with her hand and looked at Xia Yan with an apologetic look. Unfortunately, this only had the opposite effect. Her apologetic eyes pierced Xia Yan back and forth like countless knives. Xia Yan, who couldn't bear being looked at by Xia like this, was suddenly filled with blood and gritted his teeth and said, "Actually, what I said just now is a bit exaggerated, because I originally wanted to save some chakra for training at night. But since you are so interested, Xia, I will reluctantly play a few more games. Is it really okay?" Xia was a little worried. She was worried that Xia Yan would become the first person in history to die suddenly from playing cards. What kind of dark game is this? Of course it's okay, my kidneys. No, I mean I have a lot of chakra. Another hour passed. No, I surrender. Xia Yan raised his hands and gave a French military salute. However, he did not lose to Xia in the game, but he was defeated in the amount of chakra. No, this is the last time. Xia pleaded pitifully. Unfortunately, Xia Yan was unmoved. To be honest, he couldn't stand it anymore. He could only say that Xia was too unfathomable. He was talking about the amount of chakra. In order to prevent Xia from having any extravagant hopes, Xia Yan rarely frowned and said, "Xia-san, you have set this last game 3 or 4 times. This was not over yet." Xia Yan continued to take out his trump card. "And it's time to go home now." "What? A 4, Xia was indeed shocked when she heard it, and quickly turned her head to look out the window. Sure enough, she saw that the sky in the distance had been dyed golden by the afterglow of the setting sun, and it was already dusk. How can time pass so quickly? Xia's black eyes were full of disbelief, and she almost doubted whether she was under an illusion. This is considered fast. Xia Yan muttered to himself. If you play Civilization 6, wouldn't it be like riding a time machine? Xia Yan spread his hands. This is probably what they call happy times always pass quickly. Unfortunately, this statement did not get Xina's approval. This card game is really terrible. Xina subconsciously looked down at the jewel disc on her wrist, and a look of fear appeared on her face. As if it was a poisonous snake wrapped around her wrist. Xia Yan, is it really okay for you to promote this game to students? Xina quickly had this question. As a former ninja school student, Xina knew very well how attractive it was to young ninjas. After all, the popular game in ninja schools now is the hide-and-seek game that has existed for decades. Moreover, even a mature, stable, generous and decent adult like her almost got addicted to it accidentally, let alone those little brats who have no self-control. They must be 10 times or even 9 times more addicted than Xina herself. Thinking of the scene where all the students in the ninja school are addicted to playing cards and have no intention of studying, Xina shuddered. Teacher Xia Yan, are you sure you are not a spy sent by other villages to use this game to harm the future flowers of Konoha? Xia Yan obviously understood what Xina meant, and smiled and explained. Don't worry, the deck we've just used is specially made, so it can be reused. And the cards used by the students must be redrawn with rooms after each use before they can be used again. So if they're really addicted to playing cards, I will be happy for them. Because every time they play a game of cards, they need to spend 3 times as much time drawing runes. Xina finally breathed a sigh of relief after hearing this, and was glad that she did not become an accomplice in poisoning the future flowers of Konoha. She now finally understood the whole picture of Xia Yan's plan. As the second player of the Kening card game, Xina knew how fun this game was. And she, who had practiced drawing runes, also knew how boring it was. Xia Yan's idea was to tie the super interesting Kening cards and the super boring rune drawing together. She didn't know that in Xia Yan's previous life, this was called bundling sales. It seems that they can't escape the clutches of the great devil Xia Yan. Thinking that the students will have to live such a life of ice and fire, pain and happiness in the future. Xina couldn't help but mourn for them, laughing. At the same time, she finally remembered that she was also an assistant teacher. Xia Yan introduced this game to her before, and it seemed that he wanted her to help make these teaching aids. Thinking that she'd forgot about work when she was playing, Kushina felt ashamed and embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Xia Yan, I delayed your work, or I will take some cards home to make them." "It doesn't matter, I still have a lot of inventory, enough to cope with tomorrow's class." Xia Yan waved his hand and smiled. "And before this game, I basically worked behind closed doors. Just now, playing cards with you, I found a lot of places that need improvement, and I gained a lot, so you don't have to mind." Although Xia Yan said so, Kushina still insisted on her own opinion. In the end, Xia Yan couldn't beat Kushina, and after teaching her the method of making cards, he let her take a box of whiteboard cards home to work overtime. At the same time, Kushina also took away the 2 jewel discs, saying that they were used to test whether the cards were successfully made. This made Xia Yan look at Kushina with a strange look. Could this be your real goal? But Xia Yan could understand it. After all, in his previous life, he also had a period of youthful years when he felt "I'm going to die without 20 to play with." Although when he traveled through time, Overwatch is out of fashion, and Storm is going to be popular. To be honest, he still didn't see the day when Storm became popular. And from Kushina's performance, there is not much difference between the residents of the ninja world and the people on Earth. This made Xia Yan more confident in his next plan. "I don't know what went wrong." It was reviewed for a long time and more than 1,000 words were deleted before it could be published. So today there is only this chapter with 3,000 words. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 18 Uzumaki Mito, 3,000 words long chapter. Please vote and collect. In the evening, in the Senju mansion, a red-haired woman was leisurely lying on a rocking chair under the pomegranate tree in the courtyard, squinting her eyes to appreciate the afterglow of the sunset, holding a round fan in her hand, shaking it from time to time. Time seemed to have frozen in this courtyard, quiet and peaceful. The woman looked only about 20 years old. Her bright red hair was tied into a pair of buns, with a purple diamond mark on the center of her forehead, and she was wearing the traditional white long skirt of the Uzumaki clan. Although she looked young and beautiful, she had a temperament of vicissitudes of life that made people dare not despise her. Mito grandma, Mito grandma." At this moment, a joyful shout came from outside the door, breaking the tranquility of the courtyard. A figure with the same bright red long hair ran in excitedly with a large box of things. Obviously, the red-haired woman called Mito grandma was the widow of the first-generation Ukage, the current Nine-Tails Jinkariki, and the Dingyo-senshin of Konoha, Uzumaki Mito. After hearing the girl's call, Uzumaki Mito slowly opened her narrowed eyes, and when she saw the other person's appearance, she couldn't help but curl her lips slightly. "It's Kushina, what's wrong? Did you get into trouble again?" Although the years have not left any traces on her, Mito is actually old at this time, and her mentality is gradually showing old age. As her relatives grew up and passed away, she now loves Kushina, who has no direct blood relationship with her. Part of the reason is that Kushina is a child of her clan and has the same fate as her. But more importantly, she really likes this strong and optimistic girl in the daily life. Although she lives a life of being excluded in the village, Kushina still did not give up, and worked hard to prove herself every day. She even said, "I want to be the woman of the Okage." But this child also inherited the reckless temper of the Uzumaki clan. She never obeyed the provocations of others, but always hit hard, so she often got into trouble. Either she beat up a member of the Sarutobi family today, or she beat up the young patriarch of the Shimura family tomorrow. This caused Mito a lot of headaches. So when Mito saw Kushina rushing to find her, she habitually thought that she had gotten into trouble again. But this time she obviously didn't guess right. Kushina put the box in her hand on the stone table beside her, and pouted her lips in dissatisfaction. "I didn't get into trouble. Grandma, don't you remember? I went to school as an assistant teacher today. This was arranged by you, Grandma." Mito tilted her head and thought about it, and finally remembered that it seemed to be true. The cause of the incident was that she caught a cold not long ago and had a minor illness. Although it seemed to be just a small matter, it was like a major earthquake for the entire Konoha. After all, the Uzumaki clan has always been known for its strong vitality and rarely gets sick. The Uzumaki clan will not catch a cold is like idiots will not catch a cold, which is a widely circulated common sense in the ninja world. So this also means a cruel fact. Mito is old. Even though she still looks young, her body functions have begun to decline. Apparently, the chakra in the yin seal is no longer enough to keep her body in the best condition. Although Mito said it was no big deal, she even felt very happy about catching a cold for the first time in her life, and joked that she was happy to finally get rid of the name of idiot. However, the top leaders of Konoha were not as optimistic as she was. After all, in addition to being the wife of the first Hokage, Mito also has the identity of a jinchuriki. In her belly is the ultimate weapon that can destroy a country, the nine-tailed demon fox. It can be said that the peace that the ninja world is barely maintaining now is largely due to the nuclear deterrence effect brought by these tailed beasts. Moreover, the undercurrents in the ninja world have been surging recently, and there have been constant frictions on the borders of various countries. Many people have seen that a war that sweeps the entire ninja world is brewing, so whether it is Mito's aging and inability to suppress the nine-tail breaking the seal, or Mito dying with the nine-tail, it is a consequence that Konoha cannot bear. If it weren't for Mito's special identity, Konoha might have already replaced the jinchuriki. However, since that day, Konoha has been prepared to replace the jinchuriki at any time. As the top candidate for the second nine-tails jinchuriki, Uzumaki Kushina was naturally completely confined in the village. The depression of not being able to leave the village, the imminent death of Mito's grandmother, and the fear that she would become the nine-tails jinchuriki, these burdens were simultaneously placed on the thin shoulders of the 15-year-old girl, making poor Kushina increasingly anxious. The frequency of beatings of the children of the major ninja clans also increased significantly. In order to distract Kushina and make less trouble, Mito began to pay attention to finding a job for Kushina. After all, work is the best medicine to cure everything. Although she had found several jobs for her before, it was a pity that Kushina could not do any of them for long. Until yesterday, when Baiwako came to consult her about some opinions on the sealing arts class. Mito learned from her about the interesting deeds of the new sealing arts teacher and the surge in the number of people signing up for the sealing arts class. With an idea, she asked Baiwako to arrange a teaching assistant job for Kushina. It happened only yesterday, but Mito found that it took her a long time to remember it. Alas, I'm old, and my memory is not good. Uzumaki Mito sighed with emotion. However, with her young and beautiful appearance, she always felt like she was complaining without reason. Kushina knew that her grandmother was really a little sad, so she quickly walked behind Mito and started to massage her back, and said exaggeratedly, "No way. Grandma is still very young. I don't know how many boys will be fascinated by her if she goes out for a walk." Mito touched the yin seal on her forehead, shook her head and laughed. "Ha ha, don't talk about me, an old woman. Tell Grandma, how was your first day as an assistant teacher? What did you do today?" "I did a lot today," Kushina said without thinking to divert her grandmother's attention. As soon as she said this, the expression on her face froze instantly, and her hand that was massaging Mito's back also stopped. Because Kushina realized at this time that although she did do a lot of things today, there were not many serious things among them. It was not suitable to tell Grandma. Why are you not talking?" Hearing Grandma urging her to continue, Kushina knew that she could not delay any longer. She did not want to lie to Grandma, so she had to omit some insignificant parts. She began to speak stutteringly. "At the beginning, I entered the sealing art office, then I exchanged my experience in sealing art with Mr. Xia Yan, who was in charge of teaching the sealing art class, although it was done while hanging in the air. Then Mr. Xia Yan gave me a set of questions to do, and after I finished them, he praised me for my solid foundation. Although I basically did not know the questions at the end, I was almost driven crazy by the chicken and rabbit in the same cage problem." By the way, Kushina suddenly thought of something. "Grandma, what are we eating tonight?" "Grandma doesn't know, but if you want to eat something, you can tell a cook first." Mito was a little surprised why Kushina suddenly talked about eating, but still answered truthfully. "Then I want to eat chicken tonight, and rabbit. Let you share a cage. I want you to sit at the same table." It seems that the question caused a great psychological blow to Kushina, and she could not get rid of the hatred in her heart without doing so. Unfortunately, Mito obviously could not understand Kushina's hardcore idea. She turned her head and looked at the rabbit-eating maniac with wide eyes. "Rabbits are so cute, how can you eat rabbits? And it will take a while to find this thing. Even if you find it, the cook will not know how to cook it." Forget it, I was just talking." Kushina was a little uncomfortable with the look in Mito's grandmother's eyes, and she gave up her sudden whim. But she has not completely given up this plan. By the way, Xia Yan has been to so many places and is knowledgeable. Maybe he knows how to eat rabbits. I will ask him when I have the chance. Kushina thought so, and continued to tell her experience under the urging of Mito's grandmother. In the end, teacher Xia Yan also taught me how to make teaching aids for tomorrow's sealing class, although she was addicted to playing cards and did not start working until school was over. Kushina, who finally told her a abridged version of her experience, could not help but wipe her sweat. It seems that you have had a fulfilling day today. Mito nodded with satisfaction. It seems that this job can be done for a longer time. Ah? Yes, it is indeed very fulfilling. Kushina said guiltily. In order to avoid Mito's grandmother asking for details, Kushina decided to change the subject first. She clapped her hands together and pointed to the box on the stone table and said, "Grandma, you see, I brought back a lot of teaching aids to make. Do you want to see them?" Mito, who was originally smiling, frowned slightly when she heard what Kushina said. "Why do you have to continue to do these after work? That sealing technique teacher is too good at ordering people around." Although she wanted Kushina to focus on her career and downplay her worries, she never thought of making her a workaholic. "I remember his name is Xia Yan, right? Do you want me to tell Baiwako?" "No," Kushina exclaimed, and her voice echoed in the courtyard. Mito turned her head and looked at Kushina in surprise. Why did she react so strongly suddenly? Kushina complained in her heart, but she forced a smile on the surface and explained, "Grandma, this is only my first day at work. It's hard for me to do it with you like this. And these are all my own requests to bring back, as a practice of sealing techniques." "Oh?" Mito said with a teasing look on his face, "Why weren't you so active when learning sealing techniques before?" Kushina muttered in a low voice, "If learning sealing techniques before could be so fun, I would definitely be so active every day." "Fun?" Mito raised her eyebrows. Although she was hailed as the strongest master of sealing techniques in the world, she rarely associated sealing techniques with the word fun. The small toys she made to coax little Kushina to learn sealing techniques were already the limit of what she could do. "Then I'd like to see it." Mito rarely felt a little competitive. Chapter 19 Traditional Virtues in the courtyard of the Senju Mansion. In order to see the fun seal teaching aids that Kushina mentioned, Mito stood up and walked towards the stone table. Kushina breathed a sigh of relief and followed, opening the box to show Mito's grandmother. In addition to stacks of cards, there were two strange machines in the box. "Grandma, do you recognize this?" Kushina looked up and asked proudly. People who didn't know would think that these two machines were invented by her. Mito rolled her eyes at Kushina and reached out to pick up one of the machines to check. Her slender green fingers gently stroked the rough wooden shell of the machine, from the disc-shaped core part to the half-moon-shaped flat plate extending from the disc, and even the slightly concave square card slot on it was not spared. At the same time, strands of chakra threads quietly seeped out from her fingertips, penetrated into the machine through the tiny gaps in the shell, and explored the secrets inside. Soon, Mito's two slender eyebrows were slightly raised, and it was obvious that she had gained something. By probing with the chakra thread, she first determined what materials were used inside the machine. However, there was nothing noteworthy, all of them were ordinary chakra-conducting materials. Even the main material was produced by their Senju clan, a special oak with good chakra-conducting properties. The common point of these materials is that they are cheap and durable and can be used repeatedly. However, since they cannot withstand too much chakra and the upper limit is not high, the price is relatively cheap. Therefore, they are generally used to make simple or temporary barrier arrays. Of course, the cheap price is compared with other chakra-conducting materials, and it is still valuable for ordinary ninjas. So these materials are not worthy at Mito's attention. What really surprised Mito was that at this time, these ordinary materials were densely engraved with various tiny rune spells. The number of runes was so large that Mito, who was well informed, was a little frightened, and felt that the machine in his hand was a little hot. Is this thing really just a teaching aid, and not some ancient weapon of destruction? You know, when she assisted her brother-in-law in making the Thor's sword, she didn't use so many rune spells. And although they were all the simplest and most basic rune spells, the huge number and complex arrangement order made the spell circuits formed extremely difficult, so that she, as a master of sealing, couldn't fully understand it for a while. However, Mito quickly determined that this was not for the purpose of encryption or pretending to be profound, so many rune spells were deliberately engraved. because she felt a sense of order in the arrangement order of these rune spells that she had never seen before. Which ancient school of sealing art is this design idea? Mito couldn't help but have such an idea. After all, the use of this rune is completely different from the mainstream sealing art she has learned for many years. The popular sealing art now takes the simplified route of combining runes and seals, and reduces the threshold for using sealing art by converting a large number of runes into the form of seals. This is also why many sealing arts are now performed in the form of seals. If it weren't for the need to unfold and release the rune formula that cannot be simplified at the end of the spell, many sealing techniques would look no different from ordinary hand sealing ninjutsu. This is the evolutionary direction that sealing techniques have chosen to adapt to the fighting style of ninjas and continue to survive. The design idea of the rune formula on this machine goes against the trend, taking the retro route of using rune formulas to express everything. And it seems to have gone further on this road than the predecessors. It turns out that the road is not a dead end. It's interesting, Mito murmured unconsciously. She had forgotten how long it had been since she felt that sealing techniques were interesting. Because in the continuous learning over the years, sealing techniques have become an instinctive part of her body and have become one with her. Even if she has learned new knowledge, she will find that they have already been included in her knowledge framework, and naturally there will be no emotional fluctuations. However, the rune formula on this machine actually made her calm heart feel a little throbbing again. It was as if she had returned to the good times when she first started learning sealing techniques and had new discoveries every day. Mito grandma, Kushina called out a few times after hearing Mito mumbling to herself. Unfortunately, Mito ignored her. At this moment, she was immersed in the pleasure of constantly analyzing the rune formulas on this machine and constantly gaining new knowledge. Mito, who thought she had mastered the sealing technique thoroughly, now discovered that there was a whole new world at the other end of her research direction. This feeling is simply indescribable. Using Xia Yan's previous life as an analogy, it was like playing through the Johto region in Pokemon Gold and Silver. When you thought that there was not much content in this game, you found that there was a whole map of the Kanto region, and 8 gyms were waiting for you to explore. With her profound knowledge of sealing techniques, Mito quickly saw a lot of tricks inside the machine. However, her expression gradually became subtle as she analyzed the rune formulas. Because she found that most of the rune formulas engraved on the surface of the machine were just to achieve a simple function that she was not unfamiliar with: chakra diversion. The so-called chakra diversion is to use rune spells to make a stream of chakra flow through several lines on the material, thereby reducing the material's requirements for chakra carrying capacity. Since this method can greatly reduce the demand for materials, it is widely used and is not a rare design. However, the chakra diversion circuit on this machine has refreshed Mito's understanding of that concept of chakra diversion. She has never seen so many lines divided, and the control of each line is so detailed and complicated that it seems to squeeze every bit of performance out of these materials. What surprised Mito even more was that the chakra diversion design on the machine was not designed to perform more powerful spells, but to reduce the wear and tear on the material when the chakra flows and extend the life of the machine. In addition, the materials used in this machine are cheap and durable. Mito couldn't help but think, did the designer of this machine intend to pass this thing down from generation to generation as a family heirloom? Otherwise, he would not have increased its durability so desperately. Even the clan boundaries that the major ninja clans are preparing to pass down from generation to generation have not reached this level. After all, the more rune spells there are, the greater the probability of problems, and then the gains will outweigh the losses. Mito rubbed her swollen temples, feeling a little confused. Of course she couldn't understand. Because all this was attributed to the traditional virtue that Xia Yan inherited from the Chinese people for 5,000 years, poverty. Poverty sometimes limits people's imagination. But poverty sometimes also makes people exert strong subjective initiative. Squeezing out all the performance of the materials and designing complicated chakra diversion circuits to prolong the life of the machine are just basic operations that Xia Yan, who was used to being poor, does to save money. And this is naturally unimaginable for the princess of the Uzumaki clan who has been pampered since childhood and writes and throws away talismans one by one. Just like the big man above, he will never understand that the feet are just decorations. But Mito didn't dwell on it for too long. She decided to ignore this part of the design for the time being and explore deeper into the machine. However, her exploration soon encountered obstacles. Because she found that the key components deep inside the machine were all set with shielding arrays, and it was impossible to spy on the secrets through chakra means. Mito was slightly stunned, then shook his head and smiled bigly. In the excitement, he forgot the anti-theft design that almost all room products have. In this case, the violent disassembly and cracking method should not work. Mito, whose exploration was blocked, finally came to his senses and saw Kushina, who was bored and did not dare to disturb her thinking. She thought about it and asked the question she wanted to know most now. Did the child named Xia Yan do this? Kushina was startled by her sudden words and finally recovered. Thinking about the question asked by her grandmother just now, Kushina scratched her head and replied, I didn't ask, but it should be. Mito, who did not get a definite answer, rolled his eyes at Kushina unhappily. Look at you, you don't understand such an important thing, you just play. You really got it right. Kushina couldn't refute it, so she had to stick out her tongue and tried to get away with it. Bang! Mito didn't spoil Kushina, he gave her a light slap on the head with his fingers, and seeing Kushina covering her forehead with tears in her eyes, he couldn't help but sigh after laughing. Thinking that the person who made this machine was probably a child of Kushina's age, Mito finally felt that his time was over. Chapter 20 Mito's Big Revelation. Projection Technique, Dual Disc, Reuse of Talisman Paper. In the courtyard of the Senju Mansion, Mito had just finished listening to Kushina's introduction to the dual disc and was muttering to herself. She finally understood why that teacher Xia Yan designed the room formula circuit that was so complicated that it was crazy, and also wanted to slow down the wear of those materials. It turned out that it was to reduce the initial cost of learning the seal technique so that more students could learn this course. According to Kushina, this method can reduce the material cost of practicing drawing basic rune formulas to only 1/4. When Mito got this data, her expression almost couldn't hold it. Because she knew that based on this point, Xia Yan, this young man, was enough to occupy a place in the history of the development of the seal technique. After all, the ideas of the seal technique are very different from those of ordinary ninjutsu, so it is very difficult to learn, which makes many ninjas stay away from it. But the seal technique is also an indispensable technology of Konoha, involving the village's barrier protection, the production of talismans such as detonating talismans, and even the control of the tailed beasts. Therefore, how to increase the number of skilled technicians who master the seal technique has always been a difficult problem for Konoha. Otherwise, the ninja school, which has always been stingy and only teaches the three-body technique, would not spend a lot of money to open a basic seal technique course. The purpose is to select students with sealing skills and assign them to the seal class for further study in the future. Xia Yan's method has reduced the initial cost to only 1/4. This means that the cost of training one student before can now train 4 students at the same time. It is not difficult to see how important this is to Konoha. No wonder Baiwaka was so high-spirited yesterday and generously said that she would expand the number of students in the expensive seal technique class. For Baiwaka, who discovered the talent of Xia Yan, I'm afraid that Hiruzen will not dare to speak loudly to her in the future. Although he didn't dare to do so before, after some careful thinking, Mito now understands the good intentions of Xia Yan. However, new questions arise. I understand the reason, but why do you want to make it in the form of a card game? Obviously, as long as you have that idea, you can make a simpler and lower-cost machine. The only answer to this question is the reason that first got her interested in these teaching aids. Hey, it's just for fun. So many ingenious designs are gathered together, and in the end, it's just for fun. Mito shook his head and smiled bitterly, feeling a little behind the young people's train of thought. Hearing Mito's complaints, Kushina was still unaware and enthusiastically recommended her to the side. Yes, this game is fun, Grandma, do you want to try it? Okay, let me, an old woman, see how fun this thing is. Mito laughed at herself. After that, she put the dual disc on her wrist under Kushina's hand-in-hand guidance. Then Mito took another card handed over by Kushina and slowly placed it on the card slot of the dual disc. Adaptation is not random editing, and parody is not nonsense, as the voice lines of the card sounded. A man with a ruya stick in his right hand and a pergola behind his back appeared in front of her. If you look closely, you will find that this man looks 70% similar to the third Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen. Grandma, look, this must be Sarutobi Sasuke, the father of the third Hokage. Kushina pointed at the shadow and shouted. Mito was a little surprised to suddenly see the figure of an old friend, and her spirits were lifted. She looked around the shadow of Sarutobi Sasuke with interest, and then smiled and said, it's quite realistic, but how did Xia Yan also make the guy Sarutobi? Kushina recalled and recounted what Xia Yan said. I remember Xia Yan seemed to say that although there are history classes in school, they are not taken seriously by students. So he wants to connect history through these character cards, so that students can remember history, remember those predecessors who sacrificed for the village, and remember how hard it is for us to live in peace now. Of course, Xia Yan also said something about getting a big IP for free, but Kushina didn't understand, so she didn't say it. Remember history, Xia Yan is really thoughtful. Mito chewed over what Kushina had just said in his heart again, and couldn't help showing a gratified expression. He had a better impression of the teacher Xia Yan, whom he had never met. Not only is the sealing technique imaginative and unique, but more importantly, he also has an amazing awareness and is the true successor of the Wall of Fire. If the guy were still alive, he would definitely hold Xia Yan's hand and ask, "Young man, will you pass on the fire?" To be honest, if it weren't for Kushina, Mito would have thought of accepting a disciple. How come other people's children are so outstanding? Thinking of this, Mito couldn't help but glared at Kushina in annoyance. Kushina was confused and didn't know what she had done wrong. In the following time, Mito took pictures of various cards on the jewel disc out of curiosity. Under the last rays of the sun, the famous figures of the troubled times appeared one by one and appeared in the yard one after another. If it weren't for the fact that most of these phantoms looked and dressed differently from the real ones, Mito would have thought that he had traveled through time and space and returned to the turbulent warring state period. Feeling emotional, Mito took Kushina's hand and sat down at the stone table. While skillfully tapping the cards to summon the phantoms of the characters, he also commented on them. Sometimes he told Kushina about the embarrassing things that the phantoms had done before, and sometimes he complained about how these phantoms were not like the real ones, and asked Kushina to take out a notebook to record them and give them to Xia Yan for improvement. At this time, she just remembered that she hadn't commented on the phantom of Sasuke Sarutobi that she summoned at the beginning, so she added, "Actually, I just wanted to say that Sarutobi is not so tall, and his demeanor should be a little more wretched to be like, hey, Kushina, why don't you write it down?" Kushina's mouth twitched. "Grandma, even if I write it down, Xia Yan doesn't dare to really change it like this. After all, this is the father of the third generation Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen. Don't want to stay in Konoha anymore, right? You want to leave after offending the village chief? Not that easy." Mito also understood what Kushina meant and rolled his eyes. What about remembering history? But Mito also knew that his proposal was not very realistic, so he had no choice but to vent his dissatisfaction by breaking the news. TSK, that old pervert Sasuke should be thankful that he has a good son. Let me tell you, the guy actually handed me a love letter before. Grandma, have you known the father of the third grandfather so long? Kushina asked with interest. Could it be that Grandma Mito had an unknown triangle relationship when she was young? Sarutobi Sasuke, who was a childhood sweetheart of Grandma Mito, was defeated by the sky-dropping Hashirama Senju. He watched his beloved woman fall into the arms of another man. For the sake of peace in the ninja world and the continuation of his family, he had to reluctantly join the village established by the other party and be driven by him. Kushina instantly imagined a sadistic love story of hundreds of thousands of words. As a result, Mito said dimly, "No, I'm talking about what happened a few years ago." Kushina. ... That's just an old man. Maybe because she saw a lot of old friends, Mito's mentality became younger. After revealing a big piece of news, she was more relaxed and continued to point out the situation. A cataract patient with long flowing hair appeared. Hyuga Tenin is quite restored. That's right, the Hyuga family looks the same anyway. By the way, he also confessed to me. Kushina. ... She didn't even dare to ask when it happened. A man with ordinary looks and no special features appeared, the old patriarch of the Mito family. I forgot his name, nothing much to say, he also likes me. Kushina. ... A handsome man with hedgehog-like long hair and wearing red layered armor appeared. Even Uchiha Madara has done it to Xia Yan. He is so bold. Let me tell you, Kushina interrupted helplessly. Let me guess, he likes you too, Grandma, right? PFFT. Wrong answer. Mito leaned close to Kushina's ear with a mysterious look and said, in fact, he likes Hashirama. Kushina was immediately frightened by this shocking news, her eyes rolled back, and her jaw almost couldn't close. I didn't expect you to be this kind of Uchiha Madara. Wait, Grandma has been saying that Grandpa Hashirama is two-time in, could it be? Haha, I'm kidding. Mito tapped Kushina's forehead with his finger at the right time to wake her up. Ugh, Grandma, how can you play such a joke? Kushina puffed up her cheeks and huffed. She had just imagined some indescribable scenes in her mind, as if she had awakened something strange and could not go back. Mito smiled as if she had succeeded in her prank, picked up another card, and prepared to put it on the jewel disc. But when she saw the introduction of the card, her hand stopped moving. Chapter 21 Self-Cultivation of Containers. Kushina saw Mito-san suddenly stop moving, and she took a closer look out of curiosity. She was holding a card that Kushina was very familiar with. First Hokage, Senju Hashirama cost 7, attack 7, HP 10 Tree World Birth. When appearing, change the field to forest, and at the beginning of the turn, deal 1 damage to all units on the opponent's field wood clone. Consume 4 HP, summon 2 wood clone, April 7, 2001, to the field introduction. The leader of the Senju clan, who pacified the troubled times with the secret technique of wood release. Together with Uchiha Madara, he founded the Hidden Leaf Village and became the first Hokage. At the first 5-Kage conference, the tailed beasts were evenly distributed to the 5 major countries, and the ninja world also achieved a brief peace for the first time. Defeated Uchiha Madara in the valley at the end, and died of illness several years later. He was hailed as the god of ninja by the world. Mito quickly came back to his senses at this time, and said leisurely, "A person's life is really short. Even a person can be summarized in just a few words." Mito gently stroked the rough paper of the card, his voice slightly sad. "Grandma, why don't we go eat first?" Kushina pulled Mito's sleeve and whispered. She regretted that she brought these things back without thinking to show off, so that her grandmother was sad. "I'm fine." Mito smiled lightly and told Kushina not to worry. "It's just that I met so many old friends at the same time, which made me feel a little touched. And I haven't seen where the Hashirama's projection is similar." After saying that, she gently placed the card on the card slot of the jewel disc. The next moment, a man with long black hair and wearing red-layered armor appeared in front of Mito. Although he was in a fighting posture, he had a hearty smile on his face. Mito couldn't help but lose his mind again. Because compared to most other shadows that are tangible but soulless, Hashirama's shadow not only has the appearance, but also the heroic and somewhat silly temperament has been reproduced. It reminded her of the time when the two of them sparred with each other in this courtyard. Unfortunately, it was just a shadow after all. Mito smiled with relief and gave her own comments. "It's quite similar." This time her comments were particularly brief. At this time, I don't know if it was because of a bug, the voice lines when the characters appeared were only now late. So after many years, Hashirama Senju's voice sounded again in this house. And it was different from what Kushina had heard before. "Ninetale, your power is too strong. I'm sorry, I can't let you go free." The next moment, Mito's face changed slightly. She felt a strong chakra erupting from deep inside her body, as if it was about to break the seal. Then she suppressed it with her backhand in the next second. "Grandma, are you okay?" Kushina also noticed Mito's strange look, and held her hand tightly and said worriedly, "It's okay." It seems that Kyuubi is also very excited to see Hashirama. Mito touched his belly and smiled. There was another violent chakra fluctuation in the sealed space. He suppressed it with his backhand. "Kyuubi. %@%. Kyuubi was removed from the group chat by Mito for his excessive words. "Kyuubi?" Kushina looked at Mito's belly and murmured unconsciously. "There is no such thing as a free lunch." When the Whirlpool country was destroyed, Konoha brought Kushina to the village and provided her with food, shelter and various educations. Naturally, it was not without cost. She had a vague feeling that Konoha needed her to do something very early. Later, she learned that what Konoha needed her to do was to succeed Mito-sama and become the second Kyuubi Jinchuriki in the future. Kushina learned the sealing technique under the guidance of Mito-sama, so she naturally knew what it meant to become a Jinchuriki. This meant that she would no longer be seen as a normal person, but a tool, an object. It was a container for the Kyuubi. When she learned this fact, she was hit hard. If she hadn't felt the love from Mito's grandmother and Sama's sister, she would have given up long ago. But even now, the fate of becoming the nine-tailed Jinchuriki is still hanging over her head like a sword of Damocles, and she is always shrouded by pressure and loneliness. "Don't worry, my old bones can still hold on for a while." Uzumaki Mito obviously knew what Kushina was thinking, and she touched her head and comforted her with pity. If she hadn't had no choice, she wouldn't want to put this heavy burden on this girl. It's a pity that there is no second Jinchuriki candidate who can withstand the power of the strongest tailed beast, the nine-tailed demon fox, in the entire ninja world. Even her own granddaughter Tsunade can't meet the requirements. Mito continued to stroke Kushina's smooth hair, and said in a very gentle tone, "Kushina, you don't have to think too much now, just practice well every day. work hard, and play well. These accumulated experiences will become the source of your strength to fight against the Nine Tails in the future. Kushina nodded in confusion, but she didn't really understand what Grandma Mito meant. But after listening to Grandma Mito's words, she always felt more at ease. As a result, she saw Grandma Mito suddenly smiled and changed the subject. By the way, Kushina, you are not young anymore, so you should also add a sentence love well. It's time for you to have a relationship. Don't learn from your sister Tsanad, who is now 30 years old and still can't get married, which makes me worried, Grandma Mito. When Kushina heard her grandmother talk about the topic of love, 2 blushes rose on her cheeks and her eyes opened wide. She couldn't help but stamp her feet in shame and anger. Why did the topic suddenly jump from the serious fate of Jinchuriki to urging marriage? Is the end of the universe really about urging people to get married? Oh my god, she's just a child. Thinking about discussing the topic of love with her grandmother, Kushina was so embarrassed that she could dig out a 3-bedroom, 1 living room house with a small yard with her feet. What's there to be embarrassed about? You guys are still in a good era. In the past, we couldn't even have a free love relationship. Seeing Kushina's face turn red when she heard this topic, like a small tomato, Mito couldn't help but laugh. She took the opportunity to hug Kushina into her arms and gently stroked her red hair. Kushina also coquettishly buried her face in Mito's grandmother's chest and rubbed it left and right. Then she heard her grandmother speaking to her in a gentle tone. Kushina, listen carefully. Although we are destined to be the container of the Nine Tails, but becoming a Jinchuriki does not prevent us from having the possibility of happiness. The trick is to fill the container with love before putting the Nine Tails in. In that case, even if we have to live as the Nine Tails Jinchuriki, we can still be happy. Kushina finally understood the true meaning of what her grandmother had said to her before. After a moment of silence, she looked up and asked Mito's grandmother. Then, Grandma, are you happy as a Jinchuriki? Mito was slightly stunned when she heard this. To be honest, she had not thought about this question. She didn't even know what answer she would give. But her eyes could not help but drift to the phantom of Hashirama with a smile on his face not far away. Bits and pieces of the past kept coming to her mind. Sweet, sour, spicy, plain, although there were many painful things that happened. But the corners of her mouth still unconsciously curled up gradually, and she squinted her eyes with a smile. In the end, Kushina didn't hear her grandmother's answer, but from her grandmother's face, she had already gotten the answer she expected. Chapter 22 I really don't want to admit that I made a mistake because of my youth. 2 flowers bloom, each showing its own beauty. Just when Kushina and Mito are discussing how to deal with the vixen, Xia Yan had just finished dinner and walked out of a ramen shop called Fuinjutsu Ramen. This shop has been his first choice for dinner since he returned to the village. In addition to the fact that the ramen here is cheap and delicious, there is another reason. That is, he discovered that the legendary Otsutsuki Traku, the hand-beating uncle who took good care of Naruto in the original work, was actually a ramen chef here. Xia Yan also solved the unsolved mystery that had puzzled him for many years. Why didn't he find the famous time traveler check-in point? Each Traku ramen shop in the entire Konoha, whether he was in school before or after he came back this time. It turns out that the hand-beating has not gone out to set up his own business. After discovering that the hand-beating worked in this shop, Xia Yan liked to come here to eat. He didn't have any purpose, but it was also interesting to be able to witness from the side how the hand-beating, whose skills are not perfect now, grows into the Uncle Traku in the future. After leaving the ramen shop, Xia Yan walked towards the southeast corner of the village. Not long after, he arrived at the door of his house. In front of him was an ordinary Japanese-style house. The whole house was not big and a little old, but it was quiet. Although this is a bit like if a person has no advantages, then praise him for being honest and dutiful, this house was left by Xia Yan's parents. Although Xia Yan did not bring his own blood in, he still inherited the tradition of the time traveler. Both parents died. Not long after he started attending the ninja school, his parents set a flag of giving him a brother or sister after returning, and then rushed to the front line together. As a result, not to mention the brother and sister, Xia Yan never saw them again. Fortunately, Xia Yan was able to take care of himself at the time and was not sent to an orphanage. And his parents were honest people, and they saved all the money they earned from the missions, which was considered a small savings. In addition, the village also issued pensions every month, so Xia Yan's life was not too tight at the time. Of course, this was before he entered the sealing class. As the saying goes, talisman paper makes 3 generations poor, but sealing ruins a lifetime. The study of sealing was like a money-sucking beast that quickly devoured all the savings left by his parents. Fortunately, Xia Yan finally learned something before bankruptcy, and was able to do tasks to earn money to support himself, so that this originally poor family did not get worse. It is not difficult to imagine that Xia Yan's stingy rune drawing technique was the root cause of the disease from that time. After exhausting those savings, all Xia Yan's parents left him was the house in front of him. So even in the most difficult times, Xia Yan never thought of selling it. After all, this is the last mark of his two cheap parents left in this world. Pushing open the gate of the yard, passing through the empty front yard with only a wooden stake, Xia Yan took out the key, opened the door of the house and walked in. After entering the door, he habitually said, "I'm back." As soon as the voice fell, Xia Yan heard the crackling sound of footsteps on the old wooden floor of the house. Soon, 3 chubby children who looked only 2 or 3 years old appeared in the corridor in front of the entrance, looking at Xia Yan with joy. "Dad, you are here!" They shouted in unison, opened their arms at the same time, and ran over with their short legs. Xia Yan wanted to dodge, but was worried about hurting them, so he had to stand helplessly and let them boss him. So the 3 little things easily surrounded Xia Yan. The little guy in red looked naughty, grabbing Xia Yan's clothes and trying to climb on him. The little guy in blue seemed to be well behaved. While holding Xia Yan's hand, he secretly picked up a marker and put it on his trouser legs. The little guy in green was honest and just hugged Xia Yan's thigh like a sloth. A quick look would reveal that these 3 children not only looked like they were printed from the same mold, but also looked very similar to Xia Yan. Oh my god. No way. Could it be that our teacher Xia Yan, who is loved and respected by everyone in the ninja school, actually has a private relationship behind our back? I've told you so many times, don't call me Dad. Xia Yan was frowning. He carefully put the 3 little ghosts on his body back to the ground with both hands, and said unhappily, "This joke was really funny the first time, and it was still interesting the second time, but it became boring after repeating it too much. As my shadow clones, how come you never get tired of playing with it?" The little guy in red made a face. "Who said that? We think it's still so fun." The little guy in blue also nodded and analyzed. "Number 1 is right, you ignore the difference between yourself as the original body and our clones. Although the memories are the same, due to the difference in the original body and the clone's cognition of their own identities, we may have completely different views on the same issue. More importantly, if we don't think it's interesting, we won't repeat this behavior." The little guy in green thought about it and raised his hands. "Me too." Xia Yan, who was called the original body, held his forehead and sighed weakly, feeling a little tired. As he said just now, the 3 little ones in front of him are actually clones created by him using the shadow clone technique. To be honest, if it weren't for the large amount of chakra consumed to create these 3 clones, Xia Yan wouldn't have been drained by chakra during the day. The shadow clone technique must be familiar to those who have read the original work. After all, someone relied on a shadow clone and a ball-rolling trip to make a story for more than 700 episodes. For time travelers, the shadow clone technique is an official plugin that everyone must have. Xia Yan has been in the ninja world for so many years, so naturally he found an opportunity to learn it. The so-called shadow clone technique is a B-level ninjutsu invented by the 2nd generation Okage Senjutsu Brahma, which can use chakra to create physical clones. The characteristics of these clones are that they have a consciousness independent of the caster's body and can perform various actions like the body. However, the really scary thing about this technique is that after the clone is released, the memory and experience will return to the body along with the chakra. This also means that if this technique is used for practice and learning, the efficiency can be easily increased several times. In the original work, Naruto's grades in the ninja school were not ideal. Until he met Fang, no. It was not until he met the superior version of this technique, the multiple shadow clone technique, that he began his counterattack journey. Rasengan, wind attribute changes, spiral shuriken, sage mode, all these skills that require years of practice were learned by him in a short period of time with the help of shadow clones. The geniuses in his eyes were soon left behind by him and couldn't even breathe a breath. Even Sasuke couldn't stand the blow. In order to become stronger, he ran away at night and asked Aunt Snake, who coveted his body, for help. "Auntie, I don't want to work hard anymore." It can be imagined how buggy the shadow clone technique is. Of course, the only one who can use this bug so unreasonably is the chosen child of destiny, Uzumaki Naruto. Because when this technique is released, the memory of the clone will return to the main body at once, which will cause a great burden on the mind of the caster. Therefore, although this technique is widely circulated in the ninja world, people generally only use it as a means of conducting espionage. Probably only people like Naruto who are thick-skinned and time travelers with strong mental power are qualified to use this multi-opening plugin. Unfortunately, after Xia Yan learned this technique, he found that the legendary setting of time travelers with strong mental power did not seem to work on him. He was tracking the organization down again. After testing, he found that his tolerance for shadow clones was no different from that of ordinary ninjas. It was okay for simple work, but if the shadow clone returned to the original body after several hours of intensive learning, it would make Xia Yan feel as if he had been up all night, and the gain would be more than the loss. God knows how Naruto split hundreds of clones to practice at the same time, and was able to withstand the impact of a large amount of memory without becoming a fool. After temporarily excluding the possibility that Naruto was originally a fool, Xia Yan could only sigh. It turns out that people cannot be generalized. However, Xia Yan did not give up this technique. Since normal means don't work, it's time for him to use his imagination to modify the ninjutsu. And this modification resulted in the three things in front of him. The hand-printed stores opened during the Lost Town movie, which was a few years later. Chapter 23 Shadow Clone Technique Youth Edition. After Xia Yan successfully built the prototype of the chakra intelligent brain, he began to develop rune ninjutsu. Simply put, with the help of the computing power of the prototype, through various algorithms, the seal language used in ninjutsu was analyzed and converted into rune language. Unlike most ninjas who only know the results of various ninjutsu but not the reasons. Complete conversion into rune ninjutsu means that there is no secret for Xia Yan. The no-seal technique is just a basic operation. More importantly, Xia Yan can modify and customize these rune ninjutsu to make it more in line with his own wishes. For example, as long as Xia Yan wants, let alone carving a dog head on the earth wall, there is no problem carving the King Mingshan head on it. And the projection technique he performed in class, the revelation, was also created by analyzing the three-body technique. After the analysis of the three-body technique was completed, Xia Yan's next analysis was naturally the shadow clone technique with huge potential. It's a pity that the shadow clone technique is a B-level ninjutsu, and it is not as easy to be completely analyzed as the E-level ninjutsu like the three-body technique. Until a few days ago, Xia Yan's analysis of the shadow clone technique was stuck at 66.6%, and it was difficult to make any progress. The main reason for the difficulty in continuing the analysis was still the old problem, because Xia Yan did not master enough runes. Therefore, he could not express the unanalyzed part in the form of rune language. This is why Xia Yan insisted on returning to the ninja school to be a teacher. In order to collect more original runes, so as to break through the bottleneck of analyzing ninjutsu. Although the shadow clone technique has not been analyzed yet, Xia Yan has a deep understanding of it in the process of analyzing this technique. These understandings have allowed Xia Yan to find loopholes in the shadow clone technique, which can be used to fine-tune it, and it is no longer only able to split out a shadow clone that is exactly the same as himself. And the three little ones in front of him are the things he got out of the bug. As we all know, the shadow clone will continue to consume chakra while maintaining its own existence. And Xia Yan is also very confident about his mega chakra. So in order to create more clones and keep them longer, his idea of adjusting the shadow clones is very similar to his idea of sealing. That is, save as much as possible. It can be seen that in his previous life, when he bought a mobile phone, he would not buy the standard version if there was a youth version, and would not buy the youth version if there was a beggar version. Xia Yan, considering that his shadow clones are mostly doing research work, it is just a simple mental activity. So the charming and eye-catching chest muscles, 8-pack abs, arm muscles, and mermaid lines are completely useless and not worth consuming precious chakra to maintain. Therefore, Xia Yan also customized a real youth version of the shadow clone technique for himself. He first created 3 small balls similar to his own chakra brain, and drew a special interference array on them. Then when Xia Yan used these 3 small balls as a medium to perform the shadow clone technique, the interference formula above would affect the operation of the shadow clone technique, causing a bug, so that the shadow clone technique reflected his appearance when he was 3 years old. Why choose 3 years old? This is because the weight of the baby's brain at this stage is close to that of an adult's brain, and it can basically take care of itself. This is the most cost-effective form that Xia Yan determined after many attempts. Of course, Xia Yan has also tried other routes, such as directly splitting several brains and throwing them into a petri dish to let them think about life. Brain in a jar warning. Unfortunately, due to lack of skills, Xia Yan's idea did not succeed. I don't know whether it is lucky or unfortunate. The new version of the shadow clone technique developed by Xia Yan has enabled him to maintain 3 clones at the same time, instead of only being able to maintain 1 clone. The efficiency has doubled directly. However, his modified version of the shadow clone technique is not without shortcomings. Although these clones consume less energy, their personalities seem to have degenerated psychologically due to physical changes, and they have become as unfocused as children. And it may be because Xia Yan did not fully master this technique, but only used the interference array to achieve this effect. The slight difference in the materials and rune formulas of the 3 small balls ultimately led to different deviations in the personalities of the 3 clones. Xia Yan studied it for a long time but could not find a solution, so he could only let it go. Anyway, as long as they can complete the tasks assigned by Xia Yan, he will not care too much about their minor problems. At the same time, since these clones are created by simulating his childhood. Therefore, Xia Yan also called this ninjutsu the infant clone technique. Xia Yan in the entrance finally got rid of the 3 infant clones. Although these 3 little things basically have no fighting power, they should cry for a long time after being punched. But the problem is that Xia Yan dare not use too much force on them. If the clones are accidentally released, their memories will return to their original bodies all at once. You know, they did a lot of research during the day, and the amount of memory poured into the brain all at once. Even if Xia Yan does not become a fool, it will be enough. These 3 little demons obviously saw this point and were fearless. So it is said that naughty children are really annoying, even if they're actually his former self. Xia Yan sighed helplessly and walked towards the study. Just make do with it, what else can you do? Seeing Xia Yan's actions, the 3 little ones also lined up and followed behind him, pulling the clothes of the person in front of them and starting to make train sounds, imitating the sound of a train. Swoosh, bang, actually, he was able to collect so many books because of the destruction of the Whirlpool country. The Uzumaki clan of the Whirlpool country has been famous for its superb sealing techniques since ancient times, and naturally the clan has a large collection of sealing techniques. This also laid the groundwork for their demise. Since Xia and Messenger distributed the tailed beasts to other villages, the importance of sealing techniques has greatly increased. In order to better control the tailed beasts in their hands and prevent others from using sealing techniques against their own Jinchuriki, the 3 major ninja villages of Kumogaku, Kirigaku, and Iwagaku joined forces with many small ninja villages to launch a sneak attack on the Whirlpool country and eventually destroyed it. It can be said that the magical operation of the big pillar to distribute the tailed beasts has caused great harm to his wife's family. As for those sealing techniques, most of the valuable ones were divided up by the ninja villages that besieged the Whirlpool country. But there are also many books that have flowed into the black market, which has led to an increase in the average level of sealing techniques in the ninja world. It's really that the Whirlpool fell, and the ninja world was full. However, when Xia Yan started to collect these books, many years had passed since the demise of the Whirlpool country. Therefore, even in the black market, there were only some leftovers, which could not fully meet Xia Yan's needs. Whenever Xia Yan heard that someone had found a precious book of sealing techniques on the black market, he was very envious and regretted that he was not born a few years earlier. In addition to the normal furnishings in the study, there are 3 small desks in the corner, which are also filled with various books, notes and talisman papers. These were specially purchased by Xia Yan for his 3 short-armed and short-legged clones. Xia Yan sat in the main seat in the study, looking at the 3 little ones standing in a row in front of the table, and slowly said, "Okay, now you can start reporting on the progress of your work today." Chapter 24 After Image Fist. Although Xia Yan would know what they had done today after the memory of the clone returned to the original body, Xia Yan still liked to listen to their simple reports first. Life, after all, must have some sense of ritual. And because the 3 little ones and Xia Yan have some differences in thinking, Xia Yan can always get a lot of inspiration from their discussions. This is something that cannot be achieved by directly absorbing memories. Hearing Xia Yan talking about serious matters, the 3 little ones finally became serious. They stood at attention opposite the desk and lined up in a row. Standing on the far left, the little guy in red took the lead and stepped forward to salute Xia Yan. Report. Infant clone No. 1. Responsible for the sorting and analysis of library books. Today a total of 32 books were sorted and archived, among which 1 unknown rune was discovered, and 3 known runes that can be optimized. I had curry pork chop rice for lunch. ... Why do you have to tell me what you had for lunch? And you were obviously a clone, why do you have to eat? Xia Yan twitched the corner of his mouth and complained. However, he was used to the strange behavior of these clones, so he didn't care too much. At the same time, he was very satisfied with No. 1's work performance today, so he still praised him. You did a good job on the main things, worthy of me. Okay, although it sounds like he was praising himself. No. 1. P. Great. Obviously No. 1 didn't mind, and was quite happy. Then, the little guy in the middle wearing a blue shirt was not to be outdone. He stepped forward and saluted and said, "Report. Infant clone No. 2, responsible for the rune culture work of the shadow clone technique. Thanks to the newly acquired runes, the progress of the shadow clone technique has increased to 69%. The results are gratifying. I had a big bowl of seafood ramen for lunch." Ignoring the last sentence, Xia Yan was a little surprised by No. 2's results. After all, the progress of the shadow clone technique has been stuck at 66.6% for a long time, and now it has increased to 69% at once, which is a big improvement. It turns out that returning to the ninja school to be a teacher is the right choice. Xia Yan said to himself, then smiled and nodded to show his approval to No. 2. No. 2. Oh hey. It seems that No. 2 is also very happy. Finally, Xia Yan looked at the clone in green clothes on the right, and he also stepped forward and saluted. Report. Infant clone No. 3 is responsible for the rune optimization of the chakra intelligent brain. Thanks to the newly acquired runes, the previous algorithm was optimized today. According to calculations, the operating efficiency of the intelligent brain can be increased by 0.7%. It is expected that the prototype will be used for testing tomorrow. I had natto rice bowl for lunch. After saying that, he looked at Xia Yan expectantly. But he heard. I said that there was a smell of stinky socks in the room. It turns out that the culprit is you. No. 3, please step back a few steps and don't get so close to me. Xia Yan pinched his nose while saying that. No. 3. See hey. Damn, why? Number 3 asked in disbelief. Wait, our memories are the same. It's clear that you, the original body, have always wanted to taste the flavor of natto. Xia Yan was speechless. I also have the idea of making a big sword, why don't you try it? He was even glad that he made his clones into children so that they didn't have the ability to commit crimes. As for eating natto, it's just a curious idea. It doesn't mean I will really put it into action in my previous life. I bought a can of canned herring on impulse. But I didn't dare to open it until I traveled through time, Xia Yan said, touching his chin and talking to himself. Sure enough, the difference in the body will lead to deviations in the choice of the same idea. If it's just a matter of eating natto or not, it's okay, but I'm afraid these tiny deviations will eventually lead to qualitative changes. Considering that the memory of the clone will return to the original body, it may even cause personality split. Sure enough, the shadow clone technique is a ninjutsu that cannot be taken lightly. Fortunately, I will cancel the clone's synchronized memory every day, so there is no need to worry too much. Originally, I planned to send the shadow clone out for a long time to play the best flow after solving the endurance problem. It seems that I have to reconsider this plan. Don't make it seem that the final big boss is actually yourself. Well, there is also that girly version of the shadow clone technique, Dollars clone technique, which was previously prepared to pay tribute to Naruto. It's better to put it on hold for the time being. I don't want to find myself suddenly addicted to fencing one day. Xia Yan analyzed a lot of problems from No. 3's small changes, and felt that he had gained a lot. After coming to his senses, he announced the end of the report. Comrades, you have worked hard. Served the villagers. Then Xia Yan asked the 3 children to return to their positions to continue working. Of course, except for the 3rd child. No. 3, please go to work outside. It's windy outside and the smell is not so strong. No. 1 and No. 2 also nodded in agreement with Xia Yan's arrangement. They also pinched their noses and said that they had suffered from No. 3 for a long time, just waiting for the main body to come back to administer justice. No. 3 was shocked and looked at his friends in disbelief. It was obviously 2 who instigated me to wheat. No. 1 and No. 2, are you plotting against me? No. 3, who was as dead as water, had no intention of arguing. He staggered back a few steps and turned to the door of the study room in a daze. The baby was wrong, but the baby didn't say it. The sound of sad music sounded in the study room. Snowflakes are flying, the north wind is howling, and the world is vast. After watching the palace fighting drama of the three drama queens, Xia Yan's mouth twitched slightly, and finally shook his head and decided not to bother to pay attention to them. Then he opened the system interface, selected the books recorded in the library today, and synchronized them to the prototype placed under the house to provide materials for the three little ones' research work tomorrow. After seeing the information that it was being synchronized on the interface, Xia Yan walked to the yard and began his daily physical training. The shadow clone technique is very good in assisting training, but it also has a disadvantage, that is, it can only return memories, but cannot play the role of physical training. Physical training still depends on Xia Yan himself. Bang! Bang! Bang bang bang! In the dilapidated yard, Xia Yan's fists and feet kept falling on the wooden stakes in the middle of the yard, making a dull sound of hitting. On the wooden stakes that were newly purchased a few days ago, several cracks have appeared, and there are many dents caused by fists hitting. It can be seen that Xia Yan is still very hard-working in the practice of physical skills. After all, even in the Boruto era, Naruto and his friends still rely on hand-to-hand combat to fight aliens. It can be seen that Taijutsu is not like ordinary ninjutsu and genjutsu, which will be eliminated due to version updates. However, since Xia Yan's talent for Taijutsu is average, he used to focus on the sealing technique, so he didn't have much time to allocate to Taijutsu, so now he is probably at the normal level of tuning in terms of Taijutsu. Fortunately, Xia Yan's fighting style in the past was not to fight with the opponent head-on, but usually set traps and wait for the enemy to fall into the trap. If he can't beat him, he will rely on his projection technique as a cover, and then use his years of hard practice to run away. After all, being proficient in running away is a traditional art of time travelers. Therefore, Xia Yan's fighting does not rely too much on Taijutsu, and his average level is harmless. However, if he wants to improve his strength, he still has to find a way to make up for this shortcoming. So after Xia Yan came back this time, he began to spend a lot of time practicing Taijutsu. He even planned to merge his rune ninjutsu with Taijutsu to create his own rune ninjutsu Taijutsu. For example, after Image Fist. As soon as the work fell, Xia Yan left a shadow of a punching man. He then stepped forward and took the opportunity to instantly move behind the wooden stake. He slightly bent his feet, formed a seal with his hands, and thrust it upwards with all his strength. Snap! Wood chips flew everywhere. A deep pit was instantly stacked out of the lower part of the wooden stake, which made people's anus tighten. Chapter 25 I captured a Pokemon. First, use the projection technique to create a clone that overlaps with your original body, and then use the instant body technique and other methods to leave the original place. While the enemy is confused by the behavior of his clone, go around behind him and use the 1000-year kill to make the enemy taste the pain of 1000 years of death. This is the basic tactic that Xia Yan designed for his newly created rune ninjutsu. Of course, the 1000-year kill is just a little bit of bad taste when Xia Yan is practicing. He dare not use it in actual combat. After all, our teacher Xia Yan can't afford to lose face. To be honest, there is not much surprising about this tactic. Similar effects can be achieved by using the clone technique or the shadow clone technique. However, compared with the simple clone technique, his projection can make more movements and is more confusing. And compared with the shadow clone technique, his projection technique consumes less energy. More importantly, Xia Yan does not need to make a seal when using this tactic, and can use it in front of the opponent, so it is actually quite good. Although it looks ordinary, it is a practical weapon. It reminds Xia Yan of his ex-girlfriend in his previous life. Although Xia Yan successfully executed this tactic, he seems to be not very satisfied with his operation. The timing of the projection technique and the instant body technique is still 0.1 seconds late, and it is very likely that the opponent will see through it. He reviewed the operation just now in his mind and made a self-examination. In addition, Xia Yan found a small problem. I always feel that this serious way of fighting does not seem to match my style. He shook his head helplessly. Sure enough, the large-scale illusions like those performed in class are the way I like to play. In simple terms, after playing too many 3-level games, I no longer like pixel games with full-screen gameplay. Or in other words, after watching too much NTR, watching pure love becomes boring. However, Xia Yan also knows that although his large-scale illusions are magnificent, they are just phantoms after all, and have no lethality at all. Not to mention that the chakra consumed is not small. It is very effective to use it as a magic skill to bully weaklings, but once it is used against an opponent at the level of a genin, it may not work. After all, who can become a genin is not a veteran. Even if there is no chakra perception ability, the intuition cultivated by many years of fighting can easily distinguish the difference between illusion and reality. At this time, Xia Yan felt that his position was a bit like that of Yukione in the future, a bit flashy and superficial. When he was bullying noobs, he couldn't beat anyone. When he met an expert, he couldn't beat anyone. In order to avoid being forced to hang up for hundreds of episodes, Xia Yan worked so hard to develop the room ninjutsu, hoping to break through his bottleneck. As for the problem of this tactic being monotonous, Xia Yan pinched his chin and thought about it. Sure enough, I still have to wait for the room version of the shadow clone technique to be developed, so that the phantom that is created is sometimes real and sometimes fake, so that I can have room to perform various tricks. And the barrier technique, if we can develop an instant barrier technique that is not so fragile, it should be quite interesting to combine it with the physical technique. After summarizing, Xia Yan began to continue to experiment with various uses of this tactic until his chakra was exhausted. After a day of training, Xia Yan went to take a hot bath to relax. When he finished his bath and returned to the study, it was already 10:30 inches the evening. No. 3 was also in the study at this time. Perhaps because they were still children, the 3 children sitting in their seats looked drowsy and could hardly open their eyes. Okay, let's stop here today. Xia Yan clapped his hands and announced. After hearing Xia Yan's announcement of the end of work, the 3-year-old child workers finally perked up. After cheering, they ran to Xia Yan and lined up. Xia Yan first walked in front of No. 1 and said, "Good night, No. 1. No. 1 yawned loudly. "Good night, real body." As soon as the voice fell, Xia Yan made a few seals and pressed his right palm on No. 1's belly. Infant seal. He exhaled softly. With a bang, No. 1 disappeared in the white smoke and turned into a ball of invisible chakra. Originally, this ball of chakra should return to the real body and bring Xia Yan all of No. 1's memories of today. However, under Xia Yan's infant seal, this ball of chakra was gradually twisted and compressed, and finally locked in a half-red and half-white wooden ball that appeared out of thin air. Then the ball fell to the ground, making a crisp sound. Xia Yan picked it up from the ground, and couldn't help but hold up the half-red and half-white ball and shouted, "I have captured a Pokemon. Number 2, number 3. Xia Yan's face turned slightly red, and he coughed twice, and put the ball on the table. This ball is actually the one that Xia Yan drew the interference array to turn the shadow clone into an infant clone. But in addition to this, it has another function, which is a special container that can be used to seal various things. Therefore, Xia Yan called this wooden ball he made a sealing ball. The sealing ball used by the novice Onmyoji Shiaozi that he showed to his students in class was taken from here. Although it is essentially the same as those storage scrolls. But Xia Yan's use is a bit strange. He uses them to seal his own clones. Although Xia Yan reduced the consumption of shadow clones by interfering with the magic circle, allowing himself to create more clones at the same time. However, the problem of excessive mental impact when memories return still exists. As for this problem, Xia Yan's solution is that since it is too burdensome for memories to return to the main body in an instant, then return slowly. In order to do this, Xia Yan sealed his clone in the sealing ball. The principle is not complicated. All Xia Yan needs to do is to deliberately leave a loophole in the technique when using the sealing technique just now. This loophole causes the chakra of the clone sealed in the sealing ball to leak out slowly over time. And these leaked chakras will return to Xia Yan's main body with sporadic memories as they are connected in the dark. Because the process of chakra returning to the main body with memories is greatly prolonged, it will not cause a burden to the main body. At the same time, in order to avoid the continuous reception of memories affecting his daily life, Xia Yan puts the time for receiving memories during his sleep time, and unconsciously receives the memory of the clone completely in his sleep. After sealing number 1 in the seal ball, Xia Yan followed suit and sealed number 2 and number 3. First number 2. Xia Yan. "Good night, number 2. Number 2. "Good night, Dad." Xia Yan. Infant seal. A half-green and half-white seal ball appeared on the ground. Then number 3. Xia Yan. "Good night, number 3. By the way, you don't have to reply to me. You stink as soon as you open your mouth." Number 3. Xia Yan. Infant seal. A half-green and half-white seal ball appeared on the ground. Xia Yan was the only one left in the study. He took the 3 seal balls, walked into his room, and placed them on the 3 grooves of the bedside table. Bits and pieces of memories had gradually emerged in Xia Yan's mind, making him drowsy soon. After a big yawn, Xia Yan said goodnight to the 3 seal balls again, turned off the lights and went to bed. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.